Hey everyone, welcome back to Paranormal M. Thanks for being here with me tonight. I've got a few unsettling stories to share, and the first one starts with someone walking alone through the woods with a low phone battery and only the moonlight to guide them. If you enjoy the stories, please leave a like, and if you've had something strange happen that you can't explain, you can send it to me. This one begins quietly, but it doesn't stay that way for long. So go ahead and get comfortable, and let's get into it. I hope you all sleep well tonight. This happened last summer, in 2025, right around the 4th of July. It was late, somewhere between about 12:30 and 4 in the morning, and I was 27 at the time. I'm only 4'11", so I've always been pretty aware of how vulnerable I can feel when I'm alone. That night, all I had on me was pepper spray and my phone, and honestly, after what happened, that didn't feel like nearly enough. It's the reason I eventually got licensed to carry for protection. My brother, Darren, and a few of his friends had built this little fort deep in the woods, about 3 miles from the parking lot at Settlesbridge Park. They had gone ahead before me, and I showed up late, close to 12:40 in the morning. So I had to walk the trail by myself. My phone was at something like 16%, and I didn't want to waste the battery using the flashlight. Luckily, the moon was full and bright enough to see by, so I just let that guide me. The first part of the trail was this old logging road off to the left side of the parking lot. It was overgrown, with trees crowding in on both sides, and the farther I got, the more it felt like the woods were swallowing the sound around me. I was a little more than halfway down that road when I saw it. There was a tall white figure standing near a tree on the left side of the trail. It wasn't walking, it wasn't hiding. It was just standing there, rocking from side to side. And I remember my mind going completely cold and practical for a second. I started calculating how far I was from my car, how far I was from the fort. What would happen if I turned around? What would happen if I ran? But every instinct in my body told me turning back was the worst thing I could do. I don't know how to explain it without sounding dramatic, but something in me knew not to react, not to stare too hard, not to scream, not to let it know I had seen it. So I kept walking. I walked right past it. I didn't look directly at it once I got close. I just kept my pace steady and continued down the logging road until I reached the spot where the path turned sharply left into the trees, maybe 10 feet before the road ended. From there, I walked another couple of miles on this rough, hard-to-follow trail, using nothing but moonlight to keep myself oriented. Eventually, I found the fort. It was built on the other side of an old chain-link fence, and I had to crawl under a gap to get through. My brother and his friends were already there, sitting around the campfire like everything was normal. I didn't say anything about what I had seen. At some point, Darren asked me to go find more firewood, so I took a flashlight they gave me and started looking around. We all had this kind of unspoken belief that the other side of the fence was where the bad feeling was, that our side was safe. We were wrong. I started walking up this hill, sweeping the flashlight around, looking for branches. And at the top of the hill, maybe 70 or 80 feet away, I saw the profile of something standing on all fours. Its face looked wrong, flat, too still. I told myself it was a deer. I needed it to be a deer. So I just turned around, left the firewood, went back to the fire, and sat down. Again, I said nothing. The rest of the night went on in this strange, almost normal way. Some of them fired guns into the hill I had just climbed. They drank a little, though I didn't. They set off fireworks in a small clearing they had made, and some of them smoked. Eventually, we decided my brother and one of his friends would drive us back in my car. The walk back to the parking lot was quiet. Nothing happened. And honestly, that almost made it worse. When we got to the car, I sat in the passenger seat and stared out the window, scanning the trees. I don't even think I was doing it consciously. I was just waiting to see it again. Then my brother started backing out. And there it was. It was standing on two legs among the trees, maybe 50 feet into the woods, directly in front of the area where our cars had been parked. I don't know whether it had followed us or if it had been waiting there the whole time, knowing we'd have to come back. But I saw it. I swear I watched it drop down onto all fours. Then it ran. It broke into a full sprint and chased the car through the woods. We were going around 35 miles per hour, and this thing kept up. It was running on all fours, zigzagging between the trees, matching us like the forest wasn't even slowing it down. It only veered away when we reached the fence line near the houses. I still don't know what it was. I don't have a clean explanation for it, but I've seen it more than once since then. The fort isn't really there anymore. The nearby HOA had it taken apart, so now there are just some structural remains and an old deer stand out there. And the part that still sits heavy with me is this. My brother and I both had another encounter with it recently, just a few weeks ago in May. So whatever that thing is, I don't think it ever really left. I need to tell you what happened when we went back to that house in Armory Park, because honestly, even now, I'm still trying to make sense of it. It had been a couple of weeks since I last shared anything. We needed space after everything that happened the first time. Not just physical rest either. It felt like our minds needed to come down from a kind of static that had followed us home. The first visit had already left us shaken. My girlfriend, Lena, had sensed something strong around that house before we even started investigating. We got activity on the EMF meters, strange responses through the spirit box, and at one point, I developed this awful migraine and nausea while she seemed to be communicating with what we believed was a little girl. We had left quickly that night because there were people nearby, and we didn't want to draw attention to what we were doing. But both of us felt like the session wasn't finished. So, before we posted about that first visit, we had already gone back a second time, and I really wish the warnings had reached us sooner. Afterward, people told us to be careful. They reminded us that spirits can mislead you. Something can present itself as small, sad, or harmless, but that doesn't mean it is. We were told to protect ourselves, set boundaries, and never assume anything is safe just because it feels wounded. That advice stayed with us, but by then, we had already experienced what I'm about to tell you. When Lena and I sat down at home to review the recording from the second visit, the lights flickered the second we brought out the recorder. We both laughed, but it wasn't real laughter. It was that nervous kind, the kind you use when your body knows something is wrong before your mind is ready to admit it. Then I pressed play, and the lights flickered again. I shut the audio off immediately. I remember sitting there thinking, no, this is not happening. Lena looked just as stunned as I felt. Her eyes were wide, and she just kept shaking her head. Then we started talking about the warnings people had given us, especially the ones telling us not to go back to that house. As soon as we mentioned that, the lights flickered a third time. At that point, we both took a breath, grabbed our protection stones, and pressed play. That night, we had parked around the corner because we didn't want anyone noticing us. Lena said she could already feel the energy from blocks away. The closer we got, the heavier it seemed to become. When we reached the gate, I decided to check the side yard first, just to make sure nobody was there. Right as Lena was about to step in, I heard what sounded like marching. Not vague footsteps. Not maybe the wind. It sounded like someone walking over gravel with purpose. I whispered for her to wait and looked around, but there was nobody there. It was dark, yes, but not so dark that I wouldn't have seen someone nearby. That somehow made it worse. By the time I moved toward Lena, she had already gone through the gate. Her EMF meter was glowing in her hand, and she was speaking gently. "Do you remember us?" she asked. "We came back, like we said we would." We walked up the concrete steps toward the front door, and that's when I heard it. It sounded like a little girl singing along to soft, nursery-like music. I got so uncomfortable that I backed away from the entryway. I started questioning whether I was really hearing it, but my body wasn't waiting for proof. It wanted distance. Lena kept trying to communicate. "Are you here?" she asked. The spirit box answered, even though I realized I had forgotten to turn on the scanner. Still, we both clearly heard, "Here." A little later, we heard, "No." Then, "Breathe." Lena asked, "Is there a little girl here?" "Sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" That's when this strange, loud sound cut through the air. The only way I can describe it is like an old science fiction UFO sound effect from the 1970s. Right after it, a deep male voice came through and boomed, "I don't know it." It felt like something was trying to speak over the child. Lena asked, "Is there a man here?" Nothing answered. Then she asked, "Is there someone here who lost their mommy?" A male voice replied with something that sounded like either no or go. Either way, it made my stomach drop. Right after that, a child's voice whispered, "Yeah." Lena asked, "Are you upset with us? Are you mad that we're here?" The answer came back, "Away." There was a small wooden bench in the front yard, and Lena noticed it. She asked, "Would you like me to sit there?" A woman's voice answered, "Yeah." For a minute or so, things went quiet. Then we heard a male cough come through the spirit box. A moment later, there was rustling from the side yard. Lena turned toward it and asked, "Are you playing back there?" The response chilled me. "Mommy?" Then came silence, and then a male voice said very clearly, "Stay." Lena tried again. "If you can't give me your first name, can you give me your last name?" A younger male voice came through. It sounded like Gavin or maybe Levin. It was hard to tell. Then we heard, "I died." Immediately after that, something snapped. "Shh." Lena asked, "Did something bad happen to you and your mommy?" The answer was, "Yeah." A couple of minutes passed. Then a clear female voice yelled, "Go away!" Lena asked, "Did something bad happen inside this house?" Again, the answer was, "Yeah." That was when we noticed movement at the house across the street. It felt like attention was shifting toward us, and not the kind we wanted. I said, "I think it's time to go." As we reached to turn off the spirit box, one last voice came through. "Stay, please." Lena quickly stated our boundaries. She thanked whoever had communicated with us, made it clear nothing could follow us, and we left as fast as we could. When we got home, we tried to talk through everything, but the conversation collapsed under this heavy wave of negativity. It felt like something had settled between us, thick and sour, and neither of us wanted to sit inside it anymore. After reviewing everything and listening back to what we captured, we decided to trust our instincts. We are not going back. Honestly, I still don't know what to make of any of this. I don't know if it was supernatural or if my brain just started stitching random things together because I was scared. But this has been happening over the last several months, and the more I think about it, the harder it is to brush off. It started on a day when I was really upset. I needed to clear my head, so I went walking down this old dirt road I almost never take. That's when I found the tree. It was bent into this strange U shape, almost like an arch or a doorway. The second I saw it, I got this heavy feeling in my chest. Not just regular nerves either. It felt like I was being watched. I stood there for a minute, trying to talk myself out of being creeped out. But every time I looked past the tree toward the path behind it, that feeling got worse. Like something was quietly telling me not to go any farther. So I left. When I got back near my house, I noticed a small black cat watching me from down the road. It was just sitting there, staring. For some reason, I decided to walk toward it, and it ran into this perfectly round opening in the woods. I could probably crawl into it if I really wanted to, but I absolutely do not want ticks crawling all over me, so no thank you. At first, I didn't think too much of it. Weird tree, weird cat, strange day. That was all. But a couple of days later, I went back to the tree. I don't even know why. I still don't. The same feeling was there. That pressure, that dread, that sense that something was paying attention to me. I got a little closer than before, but I still couldn't make myself walk past it. On my way home, I saw the black cat again, and I knew it was the same one because of the way it moved. It had this odd, rocking kind of walk, almost like it was limping, but not exactly. It's hard to explain. It was closer this time, just staring at me. We stared at each other for what felt like 5 minutes, but when I finally snapped out of it, I realized way more time had passed than I thought. Its eyes were what really bothered me. They looked almost completely black, except for one tiny yellow dot in the middle. After that, I told a few people about the tree. Some thought it was creepy. Some said the picture I took of it gave them the same uneasy feeling. Other people said it just looked like a cool tree. For a while, nothing major happened. I kept visiting the tree every now and then, and every time, I still felt like I shouldn't go beyond it. Then one day, I took my sister with me because I had this dumb little mission in my head. I was going to touch the tree. I did touch it. Nothing dramatic happened at first. No noise, no vision, nothing like that. But right after I pulled my hand away, this cold breeze moved through, and the dread hit me harder than ever. It was so intense that I felt something I don't even know how to name. My sister and I ran back. Later, I remembered that while I was touching the tree, it looked like something moved in the bushes nearby. Maybe it was just the wind. I really don't know. After that, things got quieter for a bit, but then I had 2 dreams. The first one was about this flat, almost 2-dimensional goat-looking thing. It stood on its hind legs, with its neck bent at a horrible angle. It moved toward me slowly, very slowly. And the feeling in the dream was exactly like the feeling I got from the tree. I woke up before it reached me, but I didn't want to sleep for days after that. The second dream was about the black cat. It was staring at me again, except this time its eyes were completely yellow. Then, for a while, things settled down. Fast forward a few months. I had started getting into spirit communication, witchcraft, and trying to sharpen my intuition. Eventually, I bought a spirit box and started experimenting with it. At first, I used it near the woods by my road. I got a few responses, but nothing huge. Then one day, my curiosity got the better of me. I took the spirit box and an app with me back to the U-shaped tree. That's when things changed. I stayed there longer than I ever had before, probably around an hour. I sat near the tree, asking questions about it, about whether anything was attached to it, whether I should be worried. The first word that came through was, hide. And I remember thinking, well, that's not exactly comforting. But I stayed. The responses were strange and vague. It didn't really answer me directly. Sometimes it felt like whatever was coming through wanted to ask me questions instead. It mentioned a machine. It mentioned a box. At one point it said, "Move it." So I moved a piece of paper on the ground, thinking maybe that was what it meant. No response. Eventually I decided I was done. I started walking away with the box still running. Then it said, "Shy." I stopped and turned around. I asked, "Wait, are you shy?" And right after that it said, "Yeah." So, of course, I stayed longer. At one point, I heard music in the distance. It sounded old-fashioned, almost classical, and it seemed to be coming from somewhere beyond the road, past the trees. Then the box said, "There's that sound again." That really got under my skin. Eventually, the responses started fading. I asked one last question, probably the biggest one on my mind. I asked if it could show itself in the same form as before, if it had been the black cat. The box brought up the machine and the box again, but I couldn't make sense of it. Then I opened another app that's supposed to detect human-shaped figures. I saw a few shapes, but honestly, it could have just been the trees. I don't want to pretend I know for sure. I was about to leave when I looked up from my phone, and there it was, the same black cat. It was walking toward me slowly, not like a normal cat wandering around. It looked like it had seen me and had chosen to come directly at me. It was thin and small, but somehow it looked bigger than it should have. Its movement reminded me of the goat thing from my dream, that same slow, wrong kind of motion, that same rocking walk. It never stopped staring at me. Then it sat down and watched me for a couple of minutes. After that, it ran into the woods near the tree. I thought that was bad enough, but then I saw it again, sitting near the U-shaped tree itself. Not directly under it, but close enough that it felt intentional. That was when I got genuinely scared. Part of me was fascinated because I thought, maybe I was right. Maybe this is connected. But another part of me just wanted to get out of there. There was something about the cat's face. I can't explain it. It looked less and less like a cat the longer I looked at it. So I left. I went back into my yard and tried to calm down. After a few minutes, I decided to walk back up the dirt road just to see if the cat was still there. I didn't think it would be. But it was following me. Slowly. The second I noticed it, that same dread filled my whole body. I looked down at my phone for just a moment, trying to figure out what to do. When I looked back up, the cat was gone. And there was nowhere for it to go. The road was too open. It couldn't have hidden that fast. And I had never seen it move quickly except for that one moment when it ran into the woods. So I ran back to my house. Then things got even stranger. When I came back outside, there were random cats all over my yard. A brown cat, another black cat, and a few others. But none of them were the same black cat I had been seeing. That one had a very specific look. One cat peeked around the side of my house and stared at me. I walked toward it and it vanished. I checked behind the buildings nearby, but there was no way it could have slipped under them or around them without me seeing. It was just gone. I went inside and told my sister everything. She asked, "Did you bring something home?" And I said, "I think I did." Later, she told me she heard a cat meowing outside. When she looked, she said it matched the one I had described, and then it disappeared before she could get close. By then it was dark, but I went outside again with the spirit box. I asked, "Is the cat trying to lure me back?" The response was, "It is." Right around then, I started seeing glowing dots in the woods. They weren't fireflies. They were brighter than that, almost sparkling. One of them kept flashing from the same spot in the trees, like it wanted me to walk toward it. And I almost did. Then I noticed more of them, almost like a little trail leading down the road toward the tree. At one point, the app said, "Look familiar." I looked around and noticed another tree near my house shaped almost like a tuning fork. It reminded me of the U-shaped tree down the road. I said something like, "Yeah, I remember. It looks like you, doesn't it?" The response was, "Yes, correct." After that, it got quiet for a while. Then it started mentioning someone named Micah. I don't remember exactly what was said, but the name came through more than once. Then it asked, "Can you help me?" And I got the feeling it wanted me to go back to the tree. At the same time, the glowing dots in the woods seemed brighter, and the ones down the road looked even more like a trail. That was when I went back inside. I was confused, scared, and honestly a little excited too, because part of me has always wanted to experience something paranormal. But when something actually seems to happen, it doesn't feel fun anymore. It feels heavy. While I was talking to my sister, I brought up the day she came with me when I touched the tree. That's when she suddenly said, "Wait, you know I've seen that cat before, right?" I asked her what she meant. She said, "When you went to touch the tree, the cat was there. It was watching you. That's why I didn't go down there with you." Then she told me something I didn't know. She said that when I walked toward the tree, the cat disappeared, then reappeared farther back in the woods, still staring at me. And that's where things stand now. Most of it happened a couple of days ago. Things have calmed down since then, but I still feel this strange pull to go back to the tree. At the same time, after everything that happened, I really don't think I should. I haven't seen that cat again yet. I don't know where it went. And I don't know if this was all one huge coincidence, or if I stumbled into something I should have left alone. Hey, I want to share with you a story that's been with me for most of my life. Something that's a little hard to explain, but has definitely shaped how I see the world. So, I grew up in Texas, lived there until I was 15, and then my family moved to New Mexico. But my experiences? They started way earlier, when I was just a kid, maybe around 5 years old, though my family tells me it actually began closer to 3. It all started at this little restaurant my family used to go to. I had to sit at this one particular table because, well, that's where my pet cat was. Now, here's the thing. My parents and my oldest sister thought my cat was imaginary at first, but I wasn't imagining it. I could see this cat, clear as day. And then it wasn't just that one. I started seeing more cats, but these other ones appeared at our house, not the restaurant. I can almost still feel the quiet hum of our kitchen, the soft clatter of dishes, and that odd sensation creeping over me. This feeling like I wasn't alone. In our house, the microwave sat in this little nook right next to where we did laundry and sometimes watched TV. It was a small space, but man, you could feel it there. Like someone was watching you, always. I'd get that feeling so strong it made my skin crawl, but nothing else would happen for years. Then, when I was about 12, after my sister moved out, the feeling changed. It followed me everywhere, all the way up the stairs to the second floor, right into my room. One morning, I was watching TV in my room before school. My phone was sitting right in the middle of my chair. There was no way it could just fall off on its own. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw it lift up and tumble to the floor. I blinked, thinking maybe I was imagining things, but I wasn't. It really happened. Another time, my mom and I were in her bathroom late at night. She has a shelf with all these glass perfume bottles lined up. We were about to leave, and she was reaching to turn the light off when one of the perfume bottles just fell off the shelf. It wasn't like someone had used it and set it down wrong. It was the middle of the night, and no one else was around. Little things like that happened. Hearing footsteps on the stairs when it was just me at home. Sure, stairs make noises, but these footsteps were different. Like someone was really walking up and down, and sometimes I could hear someone calling my name the way a parent might shout when they come home from the store. At night, it got worse. Sounds of someone walking right up to my bed, but no one was there. I used to have guinea pigs, and whenever I heard those footsteps, they'd freak out, squealing and darting around like crazy. It was as if whatever was in the house was irritated or angry. When we finally decided to move, that's when things really escalated. We were packing up, getting everything ready. Upstairs by our furnace door, we had this big metal star hanging. My parents told me they heard a loud bang in the middle of the night. They ran out of their room and saw the star swinging back and forth. Dad even went outside to check if someone was trying to break in, but there was no one there. A few minutes later, I heard a loud bang in my room and ran straight to my parents like any scared kid would. Mom told me about the star. Then there was this other night, just a few days before we were to move out. I woke up to the sound of someone trying to get into my room. I never lock my door, but it sounded like it was locked and someone was banging on it, frustrated, almost furious. After that, we moved to New Mexico and stayed at my Nana's house, which everyone in our family says is haunted. We're pretty sure it's family spirits, though. Let me back up a bit so you get a better picture. Before we moved in, my sister saw a man standing at the foot of her bed as a kid. Mom saw the furnace door open on its own. Nana would hear people rustling through papers, things moving, and voices talking when no one else was there. Dad heard a man yell in his ear, "Get out!" Even my little cousin was scared to walk down the long hallway by herself because she saw that same man standing there. When I was about 6 or 7, my great-grandma passed away. She used to be in a wheelchair, and you could always hear her rolling down the hall. When we visited Nana's, I slept on the couch instead of the pallet on the floor near my parents' bed. One night, right before I fell asleep, I heard the familiar sound of a wheelchair rolling past the living room. It was eerie, but also oddly comforting. When we finally moved in, Nana let me put one of her porcelain dolls in my room. Now, I've never liked dolls. They tend to creep me out, but this one didn't bother me at first. It sat on a shelf, but soon I noticed it would be facing a different way every time I came home from school. Sometimes I'd smell that old-fashioned powder ladies wear, faint but unmistakable. One night, around 10 p.m., while I was brushing my teeth, I heard a man say my name. Haley. I thought maybe Dad was calling me, so I went to his room and answered, but Mom was awake and said Dad was asleep, and no one had called me. Weeks passed quietly, but then I saw something. While on my phone, I glimpsed a little girl standing in my closet. After that, I never left my closet door open. Then, one night, I saw that man again, standing next to my bed. I told Mom, and she said it was the same man many in the family had seen. Maybe it was my imagination, but no one had described him before. We moved out once we found a place to rent. At first, nothing strange happened, but then, the feeling returned. Someone calling my name when I was home alone. One time, I was on the phone with my sister, and she heard me respond because I thought Mom and Dad had come home. I looked out my window. No cars were there. Things got stranger. One night I was up late, went to the kitchen for a drink, and on my way back I heard a woman whisper clearly, "Shh, she's coming. She can hear us," repeated over and over. I followed the voice to Mom's open bedroom door. I asked if she was awake, and she mumbled back, half asleep. We both started seeing shadows in the corners of our eyes. Once, I was on the couch and Mom was in her bedroom. Our rooms are right next to each other. Mom came out, looked into my room, and saw the back of me sitting in my chair. But I was never in my room that night. There's no way I could have gotten to the couch before her. She was so freaked out she had to look twice. Months later, we moved into a house my partner bought. Nothing too weird happened there, just things going missing and then reappearing after days or weeks. Now I'm 21, living in Louisiana for almost 3 years. My boyfriend and I rent a house. At first, nothing strange happened, even when my 2 stepsons were here every other week. But when I got pregnant, things started again. The baby swing where I put my youngest stepson would turn on by itself. It made me uneasy. My daughter was born 6 months ago, and the feeling that someone's watching me has only grown stronger. I've even seen a little boy peeking out of my stepson's room while he was sleeping, and there were 2 shadows standing next to my daughter's crib. My boyfriend doesn't believe in any of this, but one night he heard the bathroom sink turn on and off just as I walked out of our bedroom. Luckily, my youngest stepson, who's now 1, and my daughter don't seem scared by whatever is here. So, that's my story so far. A lifetime of whispers, shadows, and that unshakable feeling of being watched. I don't know what it all means, but it's part of who I am now. Hey, I want to share a strange experience that my brothers and I went through one night. It's a bit eerie, but I'll tell it as it happened, every detail included. So, picture this. It's around 4 in the morning. The house is dead silent. Everyone's fast asleep. Suddenly, my brothers hear this flapping noise in their room, like wings fluttering softly but unmistakably. The sound seemed to be right above our youngest brother, almost like something was hovering over him. Now, my younger brother, half asleep and confused, reaches up and swats at the air, thinking it's just a fly or some harmless bug. But here's where it gets weird. He actually feels something crawling on his blanket. That startled him enough to throw the blanket off quickly and flip on the bedroom light, ducking down to see what on earth could be causing that noise. Our youngest brother had been woken up by the sudden commotion. He peeks out from under his blanket, pulling it up to cover most of his face, clearly scared it might bite or do something harmful. They both start looking around the room, trying to spot the source of the flapping and crawling sensation. And then, to their shock, they realize it's a bat. Not just any bat. They couldn't tell the kind because it was too dark and fast. So they called out to our parents for help. Our dad was the first one awake, and he headed into their room to check things out. But as soon as he entered, the bat flew right into their room. Dad quickly told my brothers to shut their door and stay put while he handled the situation himself. Now, here's where my dad gets serious. With the bat flying around in the room, he calmly yet firmly said something like, "If you're a good spirit, be kind and don't cause any trouble. Please leave the house peacefully. But if you're a bad spirit, know that you're not welcome here, and I will remove you by force." After he said that, something strange happened. The bat seemed to grow in size, larger than before, almost as if it was mocking him. My dad got angry and grabbed something. He swatted hard, and the bat's wing got badly injured, torn almost in half, according to him. He quickly caught the bat. From my room in the basement, I could hear Dad stomping angrily as he stormed to the front door. He flung it open and threw the bat out onto the cold cement sidewalk leading up to our house. I could almost hear it twitching on the rough concrete. Dad wanted to record the bat on his phone, but then he realized his phone was back in his room. He hurried to grab it, but when he came back outside, the bat was gone. Completely vanished. No bloodstains, no sign it had ever been there. Dad even used his phone's flashlight to search the grass nearby, but found nothing unusual. It was as if the bat had never existed, just a figment of their imagination. He spent the next few hours pacing around, threatening that if the bat came back, he'd kill it for real this time, before finally going back to bed and heading to work later that morning. Later that day, my brothers told our grandma about the incident. She put on a mask and started searching every inch of the outside of the house, carefully checking for any holes or places the bat might have gotten in. They searched inside the house too, but here's the thing. There was no way for the bat to have entered. All doors and windows were tightly shut. The only time a door was opened was when Mom came home earlier. But my brothers had been up late playing video games and would have heard the bat way before that if it had slipped in then. For the next few days, our parents and grandma talked to relatives who practiced shamanism, trying to make sense of what had happened. Was it just a regular bat? Or something more? Maybe a spirit? But even now, weeks later, we still don't have a proper answer. That bat, whether real or supernatural, left a mysterious mark on our family. A midnight visitor that came and went without explanation. Hey there. I want to share something really personal and intense that happened to me. It's about a paranormal experience that still haunts me, even after all these years. See, I've always been a bit different when it comes to sensing things beyond the normal. Ever since I was a kid, I've had these abilities. Not the kind you see in movies, but real, raw sensitivity to things that other people just don't notice. It comes from my family, a long line of people with spiritual gifts. My grandparents, for instance, were known to be shamans and mediums. This wasn't just stories, it was a part of who we were. So naturally, I became the one who could see or feel these entities first whenever we moved into a new place. I guess you could say I was a magnet for it all. Growing up, I learned to block these things out because, frankly, I didn't want that kind of attention. Some spirits were just curious, trying to get noticed, but others were downright sinister. I was lucky to have the strength to ward off the bad ones or escape them before they could really hurt me. But then we moved into this one house. This house was different. It wasn't just a little haunted or spooky, it was a battleground. The spirits there were powerful and malevolent. They didn't just try to scare us, they tried to break us down. Physically, emotionally, financially. That house almost drove me to the edge, to a place where I felt like giving up on life itself. It was an old Spanish-style house with 2 bedrooms and a dark history that no one outside of our family or neighbors knew about. Rumors whispered about terrible things that happened there, involving the former owners and their maid. But what truly made it terrifying was the entities that openly revealed themselves to everyone. My mom, her partner, me, even visitors. Everyone who came in left feeling uneasy, scared, or with stories of their own encounters. We had 3 main entities that made themselves known: a shadowy man and 2 female spirits. Over time, even though their presence filled us with dread, we got used to them. We could sense their intentions, their energy, and learn how to live with them. Except for one. There was this one entity that defied everything I knew. It was invisible, but terrifying, and the memory of that encounter still chills me to this day. One weekend afternoon, I woke up from a deep, dreamless sleep. I had recently switched rooms with my mom, so I was still getting used to the new space. When I opened my eyes, I was a bit disoriented, trying to shake off the grogginess. I glanced at my digital clock and was shocked to see it was past 3 p.m. Wow, I slept that long? I thought to myself. I tried to stretch, lifting my arms, but suddenly something was wrong. A heavy pressure pressed down on my chest and neck, spreading quickly to my limbs. I was frozen, unable to move. And then I felt it. There was this weight on my right side, something taking shape even though I couldn't see it. It felt like a hairless, bald head pressed into my neck, right under my jaw. I could almost feel its bony face, its chin digging into my collarbone and chest. Its arms, thin, scrawny, and cold, wrapped tightly around my body, gripping my arms and thighs with a vice-like strength. The skin was unlike anything I've ever felt. Not soft, not warm, but leathery and tense, stretched over wiry sinew and bone. It reminded me of how Gollum from Lord of the Rings might feel if he wrapped himself around you in a suffocating hug. I couldn't see it, but in my mind's eye I caught a glimpse. Gangly, pale, almost corpse-like arms gripping me. The feeling was suffocating, disgusting, filled with a negative energy that made my skin crawl and my heart race. I couldn't breathe. Panic surged through me, but then it shifted to anger. How dare this thing invade my space, touch me without permission? I struggled, probably looking insane as I tried to wrestle this invisible creature off me. At one point, I managed to shove at its torso, and I felt it exhale cold air onto my neck. The revulsion I felt in that moment is hard to describe, like nothing I've ever experienced before. I cursed and prayed like my life depended on it, because honestly, I thought it might. The fight felt endless, but finally, I got enough movement in my left hand to push its bony jaw away from my neck multiple times until I could shove it off entirely. Its weight dropped beside me on the bed. I didn't hesitate. I threw myself off the bed and ran straight to my mom's room. She was on a phone call, negotiating something heated, but as soon as she saw me, she ended the call and hurriedly asked what was wrong. I told her about the thing, the invisible creature that had just held me down. Her face went pale, then angry. She grabbed a bottle of holy water and stormed into my room, shouting curses at whatever was there. She doused my bed with holy water, and after that, I never felt that presence again. Or at least, I don't remember encountering it more than once. This all happened just a little over a week after I had to switch rooms with my mom because of another terrifying experience. The Shadow Man, this hulking 7-foot-tall incubus-like figure, had started watching me more closely, even getting physical by laying on me while I was awake. Up until then, it had only appeared in my dreams, but that day, it crossed a boundary. So after that encounter, I moved rooms, hoping for some peace. But then, just a week later, this invisible, suffocating thing attacked me. And I still don't understand why. Why would the Shadow Man's presence be followed so closely by this strange, golem-like entity? What did it want? Was it connected to the other spirits in the house? I've spent years trying to figure it out, but the answers just aren't there. I'm sharing this story because maybe, just maybe, someone out there has experienced something similar or can offer some insight. It's scary to admit these things, but I believe that speaking them aloud is part of healing. Living in that house changed me, left marks that aren't visible but run deep. But I'm stronger now, and I'm still here telling the tale, hoping it helps someone else feel less alone in the darkness. Hey, I want to share with you a story about a peculiar experience in my home, something that stayed with me for years, and I think you'll find it as strange and touching as I do. It all starts with a simple electric doorbell I installed upstairs, at the entrance to our upper floor suite. I put it there mostly because my older daughter, who was quite the little mischief maker, thought it was hilarious to ring it before sneaking into my quarters. But then, well, the doorbell started ringing on its own. At first, we thought it was a glitch, just some odd electrical hiccup. But as time passed, it became clear it wasn't random at all. See, the bell would chime at very specific moments, like when the kids did something I had explicitly told them not to do, or when a TV program showed something scary to them, and I could see their little faces scrunch up in fear. It was almost as if the bell was the house's way of keeping us all in check. It sounded more like a subtle warning, a reminder that something wasn't quite right. One day, I was upstairs, listening to some music, just trying to relax. One of our cats was fixated on the open door, sitting there completely still, eyes wide and unblinking, as if it saw something invisible to us. The poor thing was petrified for a long moment, then suddenly darted away, diving under a chest of drawers. That's the instant the doorbell rang, and the song instantly shifted to "Can't Get My Eyes Off You," as if on cue. It was at that moment I started to suspect who, or what, might be behind these eerie happenings. We grew so accustomed to this presence that, honestly, I would often open the door and say, "Come in, dear," whenever I heard the bell's distinct ring. It became almost comforting in a strange way. Sometimes, one of the kids would look at me with wide eyes and say, "I didn't do anything this time," and we'd both laugh nervously. But as comforting as this ghostly visitor was, it wasn't the only presence in our home. Now, a bit about me. I was battling depression, slowly feeling better but still haunted by dark moments. There were nights when, without any clear reason, I'd feel so overwhelmed that the only thing I could do was curl up on the floor in a tight fetal position and just wait it out. The idea of stepping outside made my heart race with anxiety, and I'd rush back inside, desperate for the safety of my home. One night, I honestly don't remember everything, maybe a mix of pills and alcohol. I was in a very bad place. My older daughter, who was just 7 then, called my parents. By the time they got there, about half an hour later, I was talking to the furniture and even my watch. They told me I was planning to go buy Christmas presents in the middle of the night, wearing a coat over my pajamas, sitting on the bed with knives laid around me. It was so surreal. The next morning, I woke up in a hospital, labeled as the depressive patient. Thankfully, after several doctor visits, they reassured my parents it wasn't a suicide attempt. But those days were incredibly dark. Another time, though, I remember very little except a pounding headache that felt like it was going to split my skull. I stumbled down the stairs, barely able to stand. Our nanny was so scared she called my parents again, and once more, I found myself in the hospital. I kept pleading with the nurses to open the windows. I craved fresh air, but they refused and wouldn't let me open them. It wasn't until later I learned why. We were on the 8th floor, and this time, the hospital staff truly believed I was suicidal. My partner came and stayed with us, showing incredible patience during those difficult days. Fast forward a bit. We took a vacation to the beach, and those sunny, salty days did wonders for my spirit. When we returned, my doctor lowered my medication dose. I wasn't as afraid to leave the house anymore, even inviting a few friends over now and then. One friend, who had never been inside my house before, was visibly impressed. He told me he'd always wondered what it looked like inside because he'd passed by so many times, and the house had always caught his eye. He even admitted the ghost stories he'd heard added to his fascination. Curious, I asked him what stories he meant. I knew the house once belonged to a very intellectual former president, and the neighborhood was known as a bohemian hub full of artists and thinkers. That was part of why I'd chosen it. He shared an old tale about how many intellectuals used to gather there, discussing books, poetry, music, and politics. After the house was abandoned for some time, rumors started spreading that it was haunted. People claimed to see lights flickering and hear voices, especially coming from the room that's now my library. One particularly chilling story was about a group of teenagers who dared each other to sneak inside at midnight. They climbed over the wall and entered the backyard, but almost immediately, the 6 kids started feeling an overwhelming fear. Still, one brave soul said he would go inside alone. He slipped in through the basement and climbed the stairs to the corner room with the 4 large windows, the very room where the eerie lights appeared. The others waited anxiously, but he never came back. His brother, part of the group, grew worried and tried to convince the others to join him, but no one wanted to. Eventually, he went inside alone. He heard voices and was convinced squatters had taken over the place and attacked his brother. Despite the fear, he pressed on toward the room. When he arrived, everything went silent. There, on the floor, was the shape of his brother. He flicked on his flashlight and saw what he initially thought was a corpse, face soaked in blood. He screamed, calling out for the others, but they fled instead of helping. Miraculously, the brother was unharmed, just bleeding from the nose. He remembered walking toward the strange, glowing lights and hearing the old-fashioned voices of people dressed in vintage clothing having an intense conversation. And then, nothing. This story spread quickly, and many people avoided the house at night for years. Eventually, a grandson of the former intellectual president renovated the place and lived there for a while, and then it passed to his niece, who finally sold it to me. Only then did I truly understand the reason behind the strange price of the house. Thinking about my daughter's occasional nosebleeds, I still get chills down my spine. So, that's the story of the bell that rang when no one was there, and the house that holds more than just memories. It's alive with whispers of the past and a presence that watches over us in its own mysterious way. Over time, things around the house started to feel almost normal again. I was getting stronger, putting in more hours at work, and the girls, they were growing up so fast. We'd all gotten used to the little odd noises at night, the strange doorbell rings coming from upstairs when no one was there. It became part of our rhythm. My older daughter, Lily, she'd just avoid the downstairs hallway altogether, like she sensed something there she didn't want to confront. But the littlest one, Emma, she was already walking and talking, and honestly, she was talking to someone none of us could see. At first, I thought it was just a typical imaginary friend, But then, things started getting weird enough that I realized it wasn't just pretend. One afternoon, I was sitting at the kitchen table typing something up on my laptop, and I used the word widow. Emma looked back at me with those big, curious eyes and asked, "Mommy, what does widow mean?" I explained it gently, but I just brushed it off, thinking maybe I just mumbled the word aloud without meaning to. But then, more strange things kept happening. Emma was super jealous one day and blurted out angrily, "I know you were kissing Daddy last night. Don't do it." I asked her how she knew that, and she told me her special friend had told her. There was no way she could have known that. Another time, I heard her running up the stairs, tumbling and almost falling. I was in the living room and rushed over to catch her. I told her firmly, "Be careful, Emma. You're not supposed to run on the stairs." She looked to my left, eyes narrowed and voice angry. "Why did you tell her?" I was confused and asked her what she meant. She said she was sure he had told me she was running. She kept scolding the air, like she was arguing with someone invisible. I told her I'd heard her, and she just glanced over my left shoulder and said, "Okay." One day, she proudly declared she was a model, and her stage name was Jelly Belly. I couldn't help but laugh. When she asked why, I told her it sounded funny, and she shouted at her invisible friend, "That's a dumb prank. You're mean." Emma was a whirlwind in every sense. She was always making messes, climbing on furniture, and had so much energy that keeping up with her was exhausting. I'd hired a new nanny by then because during the afternoons, when Lily was home from school, Emma needed someone to watch her full time. Many times I'd get frustrated with her, telling her to be careful or asking her to put her toys away. She'd often burst into tears, especially since scolding her meant breaking up her playtime. She had this habit of going to the bathroom and shutting the door behind her. I'd hear her muttering, explaining why she was upset with me. Then there'd be a silence followed by firm little protests. No, I'm not going to. It's not fair." But after a while, she'd open the door, come into my arms, and apologize, always sneaking a quick glance behind her as if checking someone was there. I'd hug her tight, and for a little while, she'd behave better. I won't lie, that ghost, whoever he was oddly helpful in calming her down. One day, I was leafing through an old photo album, and Emma came up behind me. She pointed at a picture and said softly, "That's him. That's my friend." I looked closer. It was a photo of my ex-boyfriend, someone who had died far too young. At that moment, everything clicked into place. So I had to get used to the idea that my little girl was talking to my late boyfriend. But then, Emma started showing some really unusual behavior. Sometimes when she met new people, she couldn't stop poking them. I remember this one time, a good friend of mine, a sweet, sensitive guy, came over. I led him into the living room and went to the kitchen to heat some water for tea. When I came back, Emma was sitting in an armchair, playing with a toy, completely ignoring him. I asked, "Did you at least say hello?" She looked confused and asked, "Do you see him too?" Then she stood up and poked his cheek before finally saying, "Hi." We enrolled her in ballet classes, trying to give her something like her sister had. But the teachers told me that sometimes she made other kids uncomfortable because she'd get too close and poke them randomly. Thankfully, ballet wasn't her true passion. Another day, we were at my parents' country house when some friends arrived with their 4 children. Emma fixated on the youngest girl and, when she thought I wasn't watching, poked her in the face. I told her to stop, but then I saw her licking the little girl's arm. I quickly told her not to do that. She told me she wasn't sure if some people were visible to everyone or only to her, so she had to check. Later, my mom mentioned that the little girl had actually died briefly at birth and had to be resuscitated. I never checked the backstories of the other kids at ballet or my sensitive friend, but I think some people have a certain something that makes Emma question what's real and what's not, blurring the lines between ghosts and living souls in her mind. Things started getting even stranger. The nanny hated being alone in the house because she heard footsteps behind her and someone whispering her name in her ear. I'm sure I didn't help matters. A few times she rang the upstairs doorbell, and when I opened the door, I screamed. Not because there was a ghost, but because it was a real person standing there, startling me so much I forgot the usual eerie expectations. There was this one particularly annoying journalist who came over for an interview. Every time he asked questions unrelated to art, the microphone would cut out. I was so baffled that I started laughing nervously, which only irritated him more. Eventually, we managed to finish the interview, but a friend of mine who worked at the magazine told me later he thought I was playing a prank on the journalist and held a grudge. Then, there was that unforgettable Christmas Eve. My partner had just arrived and was walking upstairs when the lights on the staircase suddenly went out. He was getting used to his phone dying at my place, as if the batteries just gave up. But that night, he didn't bring his charger. He shrugged and said, "No big deal, it's an old house with old wiring, nothing paranormal here." Just then, the lights flicked back on, and the doorbell rang right in front of us. "Okay, my mistake," he said. We were all just getting used to these little quirks. My partner was convinced the house was targeting him. Lights going off when he arrived, objects disappearing only to reappear in the strangest places. One time, I was making chili con carne. I diced tomatoes on the cutting board and was focused on adding spices when I noticed a clear handprint on the board, right in the middle of the mess. It was like someone leaned their hand there. I thought it was my partner, who was often distracted. I got a little annoyed, imagining him touching everything with tomato-covered hands. When I asked him, he swore he hadn't done it, not even by accident. I insisted and compared his hand to the print. It was definitely smaller than the handprint. I tried to recreate it myself, but couldn't get anything similar. Then I noticed something peculiar. The pinky finger in the handprint was slightly twisted. I remembered my late boyfriend had injured his pinky playing sports. I took pictures, hoping to find a logical explanation later, but I never did. Living here, with all these whispers, shadows, and tiny mysteries, has been a journey. It's a strange blend of fear, curiosity, and an odd sense of comfort. Because even though the ghosts are real and sometimes unsettling, they're also a part of our story now, woven into the fabric of our family's life in ways I never imagined. You know, there was this peculiar stretch of time when things in that old house of mine just seemed to spiral into something wilder than ever before. It was like the atmosphere itself thickened, and the house wasn't just creaking or whispering, it was acting out. Around then, the nanny I had started really hating being alone in that place. She told me she kept hearing footsteps right behind her, and sometimes someone whispering her name so softly, like a breath right next to her ear. I guess I didn't exactly make things easier for her. There were these moments, 2 or 3 times, when she rang the door upstairs, probably needing some company or reassurance, and I'd open it. But instead of the usual ghostly figure she expected, it was just me standing there. And every time she'd scream, startled by the very living person she thought she might finally see. I felt bad but couldn't help but smile because, honestly, the tension in that house was so thick you could almost cut it with a knife. One day, there was this journalist who came by. Oh, he was something else. Annoying and way too self-conscious, always trying to pry out more than just art talk from me. But every time he veered off topic, like asking about anything besides my work, his microphone would mysteriously stop working. No matter how much he fiddled with it, the darn thing just cut out. I was watching him, utterly puzzled, and I couldn't help but laugh nervously. It was one of those laughs that's equal parts disbelief and a bit of fear. The poor guy looked downright annoyed, like he thought I was pulling some prank on him. After a lot of fiddling and awkward pauses, we finally got through a decent interview. Later on, one of my editor friends, who was also a buddy, told me he thought I was messing with the journalist and that the guy held a grudge. Honestly, I don't blame him. Living in that house messes with your head enough as it is. Then came that Christmas Eve, a night I still remember clearly. My partner arrived at the house, walking up the creaky old stairs, and suddenly, the lights cut out. Just like that. Now he was getting used to his phone battery dying the moment he stepped through my door, like some invisible force drained the power. But that night, he didn't even bother pulling it out. Instead, he said out loud, almost trying to convince himself, "It's just an old house. The wiring's probably shot. Nothing paranormal here." And right then, just as if the house was mocking him, the lights flickered back on. Then, almost immediately, the doorbell rang right in front of us. He chuckled and said, "Okay, maybe I was wrong." We were slowly getting used to these little quirks, or maybe curses. My partner even started feeling like the house was targeting him specifically. Lights going out when he arrived, things disappearing only to show up in the most impossible places later on. It was like the house was playing tricks on him. I remember one particular evening when I was making chili con carne. I had diced fresh tomatoes on the cutting board, ready to throw them into the pot with beans and meat. I was completely focused on getting the seasoning just right, the perfect balance of spices, and I wasn't paying attention to anything else. When I finally looked down, I noticed a clear handprint right there on the cutting board, smudged into the tomatoes. It was like someone had leaned on it with a perfect palm-sized mark, the fingers distinct, the shape unmistakable. I immediately thought it was my partner. He was often distracted, always moving around the house without noticing what he touched. I got a bit frustrated because I figured he hadn't even realized he'd smeared tomato juice everywhere, and probably went around touching doors and walls with his messy hand. When I asked him about it, though, he swore he hadn't done it, not even by accident. I pressed him, and he put his hand next to the mark. It was definitely smaller than the handprint on the board. Just to be sure, I put my own hand next to it, and the print was larger than mine. Going back to my old skeptical self, I thought maybe I'd done it while scraping the board with the knife, but no matter how many times I tried to replicate it, nothing looked like that clear handprint. Then, I noticed something odd. The tip of the pinky finger in the print was twisted, a small detail I hadn't noticed before. It hit me. My late boyfriend had a pinky finger that was slightly crooked after a sports injury. I took pictures of the cutting board to try and figure this out later, hoping for a logical explanation. But none ever came. And then there were the witches. No, not real ones, but 2 doll witches hanging from the ceiling as decorations. My older daughter loved teasing her little sister, so she told her the prettier doll witch was a representation of herself, while the other was her sister's. I didn't love how she kept telling her little sister she was the smart and beautiful one. It felt a little mean. Jokingly, I told my daughters that if I were one of those doll witches, I'd be so mad I'd start moving on my own. And can you believe it? One of those dolls started spinning all by itself. I mean, it was indoors. No open windows, no fans, and only one of the witches moved. I laughed. It was so absurd it felt like a prank. But my girls stared at it, wide-eyed and scared. My youngest looked up at me and whispered, "Mom, make them stop." I honestly didn't know what to do, so I just said, "Okay, stop now." And wouldn't you know it, it stopped. They were amazed and asked how I did it, but I swore it wasn't me. Over the next few days, the witches began spinning more and more, completely out of the blue. Usually they stopped when I told them to, but each time it took longer and longer. The nanny saw it a couple of times and started freaking out. She was really on edge. My partner, ever the rational thinker, suggested it might be some kind of telekinesis. But I couldn't make them spin on purpose, and they even spun when I wasn't around. We started taking the whole thing more seriously, especially because the two witches could spin in opposite directions at the same time, sometimes speeding up and slowing down, stuff that defied everything I knew about physics. It freaked out my kids too. Eventually, we decided to take those witches down and put them away. By then, I found myself diving into ghost stories and paranormal research, curious despite my skepticism. The so-called orbs in photos always seemed underwhelming to me. Just dust particles caught in the light, surely. But as I talked to more people, some asked questions that made me pause and rethink. Like, why did orbs only show up in certain places? Why would one picture be filled with them and another, taken seconds later, show none? I started paying closer attention to the photos I took, especially the ones with my kids. They were often surrounded by these orbs. One picture really caught my eye. It was a set of two photos, taken automatically about 10 seconds apart. In the first, the three of us, me and my daughters, were smiling, although my little one had her eyes closed. In the second, the three of us looked happy and alert, but there was this strange gray shape hovering just next to my youngest daughter. It wasn't just an orb. It looked like a moving white figure, a shadow almost. Another photo made my heart skip. My smallest sitting by the bed, and above her, in the corner where the wall met the ceiling, there was this blue shade. At first, I thought it was some smudge on the wall or a spot in the photograph. But it wasn't. My partner pointed out that it was exactly where the doll witches used to hang. That moment made me realize this house held secrets far beyond what I could understand. Whispers in the dark, shadows that lingered, and little signs that maybe, just maybe, we weren't alone in that old haunted house. Hey, I want to share something that happened to me a while back. I usually don't believe in stuff like Bigfoot or cryptids. Aliens maybe, but even then, I'm skeptical. I'm 23 now, and for most of my life, I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood. But recently, my girlfriend and I moved closer to some dense forest land here in Michigan. It's beautiful out here. Deer, foxes, coyotes, all living their lives in the wild. I always loved the sounds of the woods, the rustling leaves, the occasional hoot of an owl. But one night, something happened that has completely changed how I see this place. It was around 11 p.m. when I pulled up to our little stretch of houses nestled near the forest. I noticed all our neighbors had their porch lights on and were peering out their windows, scanning the darkness. At first, I thought maybe a dog had gotten loose, or there was some animal causing a stir. I slowed down as I pulled into our long driveway, curiosity growing. Then, right at the foot of the driveway, I saw it. This creature, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Its legs reminded me of a deer, strong and muscular, but its coat was different. Instead of the sleek, short fur deer have, this one had a reddish-brown coat, thick and long, almost like a fox's fur, but much denser. I shifted my gaze upward and froze. Its head was covered in fur too, but shaped oddly, like a human's head, elongated, with long ears resembling those of a hunting dog. But here's the weirdest part. I didn't see eyes, no mouth, just this eerie, faceless head staring into the night. Before I could process more, it bolted. It ran alongside a mailbox by the road, the kind that reaches up to my shoulder. I'm 6'2", and this creature's back was even with the top of the mailbox, even though it was on all fours. It must have been over 5 feet tall at the shoulder, and it was incredibly lean, almost gaunt, and it had no tail. That was the moment I saw it, and honestly, I couldn't explain what it was. For days afterward, I told myself it was just a deer with some kind of disease or mutation, maybe mange making its fur look strange. But then, a few nights later, things started going downhill for me. 3 nights after that encounter, I couldn't fall asleep at all. I was tossing and turning until dawn, and when the sun finally rose, I was exhausted, but tried to push through. I thought the lack of sleep was messing with me, but even after I caught a decent 7 hours of rest, the weird symptoms stuck around. It started with dizzy spells, these little episodes lasting about half a minute. The strange thing was, they only happened when I was trying to focus on something, looking for my keys, checking both ways before crossing the street, even searching for my phone when I knew exactly where it was. It was like my brain just glitched for a moment. Then came the images, flashbacks or hallucinations, I'm not sure. I'd see myself in accidents, my phone catching fire while charging, the battery exploding, getting hit by a car as it backed out in a parking lot. These images were vivid and terrifying, and often I'd forget them shortly after, like my mind was trying to block them out. And the nosebleeds started. I've only had one before in my life, when I broke my nose as a kid. But now, twice, out of nowhere, my nose just started gushing blood. I'm sharing this because it's been haunting me. That creature, whatever it was, it felt wrong, like it left something with me. I'm not sure if I'm losing my mind or if there's something more going on here. I still see those neighbors staring out their windows sometimes, and I wonder if they saw it too. The woods don't feel the same anymore. I'm cautious now, and honestly, a little scared of what might be lurking just beyond the trees. Hey, I want to share something that happened to me a while back. I usually don't believe in stuff like Bigfoot or cryptids, aliens maybe, but even then, I'm skeptical. I'm 23 now, and for most of my life, I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood. But recently, my girlfriend and I moved closer to some dense forest land here in Michigan. It's beautiful out here. Deer, foxes, coyotes, all living their lives in the wild. I always loved the sounds of the woods, the rustling leaves, the occasional hoot of an owl. But one night, something happened that has completely changed how I see this place. It was around 11 p.m. when I pulled up to our little stretch of houses nestled near the forest. I noticed all our neighbors had their porch lights on and were peering out their windows, scanning the darkness. At first, I thought maybe a dog had gotten loose, or there was some animal causing a stir. I slowed down as I pulled into our long driveway, curiosity growing. Then, right at the foot of the driveway, I saw it. This creature, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Its legs reminded me of a deer, strong and muscular, but its coat was different. Instead of the sleek, short fur deer have, this one had a reddish-brown coat, thick and long, almost like a fox's fur but much denser. I shifted my gaze upward and froze. Its head was covered in fur too, but shaped oddly, like a human's head, elongated, with long ears resembling those of a hunting dog. But here's the weirdest part. I didn't see eyes, no mouth, just this eerie, faceless head staring into the night. Before I could process more, it bolted. It ran alongside a mailbox by the road, the kind that reaches up to my shoulder. I'm 6'2", and this creature's back was even with the top of the mailbox, even though it was on all fours. It must have been over 5 feet tall at the shoulder, and it was incredibly lean, almost gaunt. And it had no tail. That was the moment I saw it, and honestly, I couldn't explain what it was. For days afterward, I told myself it was just a deer with some kind of disease or mutation, maybe mange making its fur look strange. But then, a few nights later, things started going downhill for me. 3 nights after that encounter, I couldn't fall asleep at all. I was tossing and turning until dawn, and when the sun finally rose, I was exhausted, but tried to push through. I thought the lack of sleep was messing with me, but even after I caught a decent 7 hours of rest, the weird symptoms stuck around. It started with dizzy spells, these little episodes lasting about half a minute. The strange thing was, they only happened when I was trying to focus on something, looking for my keys, checking both ways before crossing the street, even searching for my phone when I knew exactly where it was. It was like my brain just glitched for a moment. Then came the images, flashbacks or hallucinations, I'm not sure. I'd see myself in accidents, my phone catching fire while charging, the battery exploding, getting hit by a car as it backed out in a parking lot. These images were vivid and terrifying, and often I'd forget them shortly after, like my mind was trying to block them out. And the nosebleeds started. I've only had one before in my life, when I broke my nose as a kid. But now, twice, out of nowhere, my nose just started gushing blood. I'm sharing this because it's been haunting me. That creature, whatever it was, it felt wrong, like it left something with me. I'm not sure if I'm losing my mind or if there's something more going on here. I still see those neighbors staring out their windows sometimes, and I wonder if they saw it too. The woods don't feel the same anymore. I'm cautious now, and honestly, a little scared of what might be lurking just beyond the trees. This happened back in 2009, during one of the roughest stretches of my life. I had just ended things with my ex after finding out she'd been cheating, and honestly, I couldn't handle being in the apartment with her anymore. Every room felt too full of what had happened, so I packed a few things and went to stay at my best friend's place for a while. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. My stomach was in knots. I kept feeling like I was going to be sick, tossing around in bed, trying to calm myself down and failing at it. Eventually, I got up and went to the bathroom. I remember sitting there, looking down at the floor, crying quietly, just completely drained. The bathroom door was right next to the toilet, close enough that my foot was maybe several inches from the bottom of it. And while I was staring at the floor, I saw something come in from under the door. It was a hand. A black, hairy hand with long nails. It slid slowly under the door and reached toward my foot. I don't mean it appeared for half a second and vanished. I saw it clearly. The fingers came forward like it was trying to touch me. I yanked my foot back so fast, and when I did, the hand pulled back too, but not in a startled way. It was calm, slow. I stood up immediately and backed away from the door, just frozen, trying to understand what I had just seen. Then I heard heavy footsteps outside the bathroom. They moved away from the door quickly, like someone walking off down the hall. I stayed in that bathroom for what felt like forever. I was terrified to open the door, even though I had heard the footsteps leave. My friend's room was just outside the bathroom, but still, I couldn't make myself move right away. Eventually, I ran out and went straight to the bedroom. I woke my friend up and started asking, "Did you just come to the bathroom? Were you messing with me?" But they had been dead asleep, completely confused. They had no idea what I was talking about. The part I remember most is the fingers. I can still see them in my mind even now. They looked almost like gorilla fingers in color and texture, dark and rough looking, with hair covering them. Not thick, bushy hair though. You could still see the skin underneath. The shape was different too. They weren't stubby. They were thinner, more human-shaped. And the nails were black, long, and pointed. The strange thing is, even before that night, I had always felt something in the back part of that house. I would do laundry there sometimes, even during the day, and I always had this uncomfortable feeling like I was being watched. The air felt heavy back there. I used to tell myself I was just imagining it, that I was stressed or tired or letting my mind run wild. But after that night, I couldn't explain it away anymore. I know what I saw. I know it was real. I just don't know what it was. And I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't pulled my foot away. For years, I kept it mostly to myself. I didn't even tell my best friend until much later. When I finally did, they looked at me and said their sister had always sworn there was something back there too. Apparently, that was the reason she never wanted to sleep in her own room, but everyone thought she was just being dramatic. That part still gets to me. Because when it happened, I was scared, absolutely. But strangely, it didn't feel evil. It didn't feel like it wanted to hurt me. It felt more like something was there, something I wasn't supposed to understand, reaching out from a place I couldn't see. It's been all these years, and I still think about it. I've experienced strange things in other places since then, but nothing like that. Nothing that stayed with me the same way. And I still don't know what reached for me from under that door. I don't really like calling myself spiritual. I'm not even sure that's the right word for it. But I've always felt like my mind works in a way I don't fully understand. For most of my life, I've had dreams that feel different from ordinary dreams. They're usually about people or animals close to me, and they tend to happen anywhere from a week to a month before an illness, a death, or some kind of major event. The strange part is that they're often symbolic at first. I wake up confused, feeling like the dream meant something, but I don't understand it until later. Then, when something happens, the details suddenly line up in a way that leaves me cold. One of the first dreams like this was about my pet rat, Mango. About a month before he died, I kept dreaming that he was slowly sinking into the earth, like he was decomposing into the ground. In the dream, the bones of his little head were covered in flowers. I woke up with this awful feeling that something was wrong inside his head. A month later, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Eventually, he passed away. Then there was my rat, Marble. Around 8 weeks before he died, I dreamed that he was dying in my arms. In the dream, there was an arrow through his right eye, and the eye looked injured and ulcerated. 8 weeks later, he died in my arms on the sofa. About an hour before he passed, his right eye suddenly ulcerated. I still remember the shock of seeing it and realizing I had already seen something like it in the dream. Another one was my rat, Milo. A week before he died, I dreamed I was holding him and accidentally dropped him 3 times. Each time, I managed to catch him before he hit the ground. But on the 4th drop, he slipped away from me and fell into this endless universe beneath us. A week later, Milo suddenly became ill. After we got back from the vet, I was holding him in one arm while calling my girlfriend with the other. While I was on the phone, he suddenly jolted out of my arms. It happened 3 times, and each time I caught him. Then I realized what was happening. It looked like a final death jolt. Seconds later, he was gone. What makes those dreams even harder to explain is that none of my rats had obvious signs of illness before I dreamed about them. There wasn't anything I consciously noticed that could have made me expect it. There was also a dream about my sister's horse. About 2 weeks before she passed away, I dreamed I was standing in a field with a chestnut horse. One of my sister's horses was chestnut-colored, so I remembered that detail clearly. In the dream, I was wiping the horse's backside with tissues. I woke up feeling like it was one of those dreams again, but I couldn't make sense of it. It felt too strange and specific. 2 weeks later, my mom called and said there was bad news. She asked if I wanted to come and say goodbye to the horse. When I arrived, my sister explained that the horse had developed a pyometra and was leaking discharge. She had been constantly wiping her with tissues. That one really unsettled me because the symbolism wasn't even vague. It was just oddly direct. Another dream involved a former friend's mother. She had terminal cancer, and I knew she was ill, but I wasn't close enough at that time to be receiving regular updates. One night, I dreamed I was standing around her hospital bed with her family while she blew out candles on a birthday cake. As soon as I woke up, I had this strong feeling that she had died, but I couldn't understand the birthday cake part. That morning, I messaged my friend and asked if her mom was okay. She replied that her mother was still alive, but she had been admitted to a hospice the night before. A few days later, she passed away. Afterwards, I found out her birthday had been 2 days after her death, and her family had celebrated it early at her bedside while she was still alive. It was exactly the scene I had seen in my dream. Those are just some of the bigger examples. I've also had smaller dreams that later came true. Little conversations, unexpected gifts, shops I end up visiting, random moments that seem completely ordinary, except I remember dreaming them before they happened. But there's one experience that affected me more than any dream ever has. I've never really shared it publicly because I know a lot of people probably wouldn't believe it. And honestly, I still don't fully know what I believe about it myself. When I was 15, I became really close with a girl from school. I'll call her Alara. She was 14, and we clicked almost immediately. Within a week of becoming friends, we ended up skipping school together for most of the week and spending our days driving around with an older friend who had a car. One evening, we went to a charity shop and bought each other kites because we planned to fly them on the beach the next day. After that, we drove around for a while until both of us realized we needed the toilet. Our friend dropped us off along the promenade. On one side was the beach and the walkway, and on the other were houses, pubs, and little shops. As we walked along the seafront, we were both staring up at the sky because it was honestly beautiful that night. Then, out of nowhere, we heard an old woman's voice call out, "The toilets are over that way, girls." At first, we couldn't work out where the voice had come from. Then we saw her standing across the road. She was a very small, elderly woman, and there was something about her that felt unusual. Not exactly frightening, but unsettling. Like the air around her had gone still. We shouted thank you and carried on walking, laughing and asking each other how on earth she had known we were looking for the toilets. After we'd been, we came back outside and saw the same woman nearby. She smiled at us, so we asked her how she had known we needed the toilet. She just said, "I know lots of things." We laughed and asked if she was psychic. She replied, "Something like that." I was young and a bit bold, so I held out my hand and jokingly said, "Go on then, read my palm." She said she normally wouldn't do something like that there, but after a moment, she agreed. She read mine first and said things about my life that felt surprisingly accurate. Then she read Alara's. Partway through, her face changed. She suddenly looked hesitant, uncomfortable, like she had seen something she didn't want to say. I asked her what was wrong. She tried to brush it off and said she was finished, but I kept asking. Eventually, she looked at Alara and said, "You need to be careful. Your life is going to end suddenly." We both laughed nervously. We made some joke about needing to stop smoking so much, because what else do you do at that age when something terrifying gets dropped into the middle of the night? Not long after that, we headed back to the car. We both thought the whole thing had been strange and creepy, but as soon as I got into the car, I was hit with this overwhelming feeling that I needed to go home immediately. It wasn't just a normal thought. It felt like an alarm going off inside me. I tried to ignore it, but it got stronger and stronger until I asked our friend to take me home. I kept telling Alara she should come home too. She only lived a couple of minutes away from me, so it would have been easy. But she kept saying she wanted to stay out because she was having fun. I kept insisting. I don't even know how many times I asked her. While we were driving, our friend got a call from some mates asking to be picked up. There were 3 of them, and once I got out, there would only be 1 spare seat left. So he said he'd call them back after dropping me home. When we got to my house, I asked Alara one last time to come with me. She said no. We hugged. We said we'd see each other the next day to fly our kites. Then I went inside and went straight to bed. The next morning, I woke up to endless missed calls and messages asking if I was okay. Everyone knew I had been with her the night before because we'd posted photos and videos throughout the evening. I was confused and asked why everyone was checking on me. Someone told me to look at the news. That's when I found out that my best friend had been killed in a car accident. The car had been overcrowded and she had been thrown from the window. She died after I got dropped off. To this day, I don't think I've fully processed it. What has stayed with me all these years is the combination of everything that happened that night. The strange woman, the warning she gave, the sudden, overwhelming feeling that I had to go home, and the fact that I kept trying to get Alara to come with me. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it wasn't. I genuinely don't know. All I know is that it's something I've never been able to explain, and I think I'll carry it with me for the rest of my life. She was a beautiful soul. I still think about her often. I know there may be psychological explanations for some of what I've experienced, and I'm open to hearing them. I'm not trying to claim I have all the answers. But after so many moments like this, I can't help wondering what it all means. Maybe it's intuition. Maybe it's pattern recognition. Maybe it's grief giving shape to things. Maybe it's something spiritual that I'm not educated enough to understand yet. I don't know. But I'd really love to know if anyone else has experienced anything like this. So, something happened to me last night that I honestly still don't know how to explain. I've been sitting with it all day, trying to decide whether I should even talk about it, but I think I just need to say it out loud somewhere. Maybe someone else has experienced something like this. Maybe I just need to get it out of my head. I've always been sensitive to things I can't really explain. Spirits, energies, entities, whatever word makes the most sense to you. It started when I was little, and over time I learned to push it down because paying attention to it never seemed to help. When I met my husband, I found out he had his own experiences too. His were much scarier when he was young. Sleep paralysis, horrible night terrors, waking up afraid and not knowing why. He has always told me not to open myself up to that side of things. He believes acknowledging it gives it more room to come closer. Lately, though, his nightmares have started coming back. Some nights, he'll move around violently in his sleep. He doesn't hit me on purpose or anything like that, but he'll thrash, twist, sit up suddenly, and seem completely unlike himself. And because he's a big, strong man, it can be really frightening. The strangest part is that whenever it happens, I get this awful feeling that it isn't really about him. It feels like something is aiming for me through him, like he's asleep, unaware, and something else is pressing through that moment just enough to scare me. Whenever I turn on the light and wake him, he's confused. He never remembers anything. He'll look at me like he has no idea why I'm shaken. But last night was different. He sat up suddenly and turned toward me with this intense, angry energy. I can't even describe it properly. It didn't feel like him. I got out of bed right away and started speaking softly, trying to calm him down. I gave him some water, kept my voice gentle, and after a little while, he settled. I went into the bathroom for a minute because I needed to breathe. My hands were shaking. By the time I came back, he was completely asleep again, peaceful like nothing had happened. And I was angry. Not at him, never at him. I was angry that he was suffering like this. Angry that our nights kept being invaded by something I couldn't see, but could absolutely feel. So I did something I've never done before. I stopped shutting that part of myself down. I lay there and decided I was going to look for whatever was hanging around us. It felt like I drifted off, but not into normal sleep. It was more like I slipped into another layer of the room, or another layer of myself. I remember searching through dark little spaces, opening doors, pulling out drawers, checking corners, trying to find where this thing was hiding. Then I opened something. I don't know what it was exactly. A cabinet, maybe. A narrow door. And the second I did, I felt it. I didn't see anything. I never really see things clearly. I sense them. But behind that door, there was a wall with writing on it. I can't remember the words now, but in that moment, I knew what it meant. I had found it. And I said out loud, "Got you." The second I said that, I snapped awake. Not gently, not like waking up from a dream. I was jolted awake by the feeling that someone was standing right behind me. Then I heard it, a sharp, furious breath, like someone exhaling right into the room, angry that they'd been caught. The presence behind me felt so aggressive that my whole body froze. I was terrified. I mean, truly terrified. But somehow I turned around anyway and told it to get out. I told it it wasn't welcome here. I told it I wasn't afraid, even though I absolutely was. And then it was gone. Just like that, the heaviness lifted. But the rest of the night was awful. I had nightmare after nightmare, all of them built out of my worst fears. It felt targeted, like something was trying to punish me for looking. I don't know what I expected when I went searching. I don't know why I thought I could handle it. I just wanted to protect my husband. I wanted it to stop. Now I'm not sure I should have opened that door at all. I guess I'm sharing this because I don't want to feel alone with it. Has anyone else ever gone looking for something like this and actually found it? I was raised by my grandmother from the time I was about 9 years old. My parents were still alive, and they loved me in their own way. But at that point in life, they just couldn't take care of me the way I needed. My grandmother was very religious. The faith she followed didn't really believe in ghosts or spirits of the dead. There was no idea of people coming back after they passed. Anything supernatural was usually explained as either angels or demons, and that was the world I grew up in. When I first moved in with her, we lived in this big old house that belonged to the church she was part of. It had an upstairs with several bedrooms, and I hated being up there alone. I mean, I hated it. There was this heavy, uneasy feeling in those rooms, like the air had weight to it. A lot of nights, I ended up sleeping with my grandmother because I just didn't feel safe by myself. I remember one night, I had fallen asleep on the couch in the living room. When I woke up, I saw an elderly woman sitting in a chair near the front window. She was facing the window, just staring outside. She looked completely pale, almost white, like there was no color in her at all. I'll be honest, I don't know how much I trust that memory. I was young, I had just woken up, and even now, when I think about it, it feels foggy and unreal. But I still remember seeing her there. Later on, when I started sleeping in my own room downstairs, I would lie in bed and look out the window. Across the street, under the streetlight, I kept seeing what looked like a tall, shadowy figure. It looked like a person, probably a man, just standing there. And the worst part was that it felt like he was watching me. I would get so uncomfortable that I'd grab my pillow and block the window so I couldn't see him anymore. During the day, I'd look at that exact same spot, trying to convince myself it had been a tree or a sign or something shaped strangely in the dark. But there was nothing there, nothing that should have looked like a person. After a while, my grandmother and I moved into a small in-law apartment attached to one of her friends' houses. That was when things got worse. My room there never felt right. I could be playing by myself, completely calm, and then out of nowhere this intense fear would come over me. It wasn't normal fear either. It felt urgent, like something inside me was screaming, "Get out, leave now." That happened more than once. I never felt truly comfortable in that room. One night, I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep. I've always hated the feeling of my hair trapped under my neck, so I used to spread it out over my pillow to keep my neck cool. That night, after I did that, I felt something tug at my hair. Not hard, just a small pull. Like someone had taken a few strands between their fingers and gently yanked. I moved immediately and looked behind me, but there was nothing there, just the wall. So I laid back down, tried to calm myself, and then it happened again. That second time scared me so badly. I tucked all my hair under my head and stayed that way. After that, it stopped. But even now, thinking about it gives me chills, because whatever it was, it felt like it touched me. I hadn't told my grandmother about any of this. I didn't want her to think something was wrong with me, and I honestly didn't know how she would react. But looking back, I think she knew something was going on. I was obviously uneasy, especially in that room. The final thing that happened was when I was in the shower. I was finishing up when I heard this loud static noise coming from my bedroom. It sounded like a radio, but that didn't make sense because I had this little portable radio that I almost never used. When I got out and went to my room, my grandmother was standing there holding it. The radio was on full volume, blasting static. She turned it off, looked at me, and didn't say much. Then she went into her room and came back with her mother's Bible. She opened it to a passage, placed it on my nightstand, and left it there. After that, the worst of it stopped. I still felt uneasy in that room sometimes, but the extra things, the tugging, the sudden fear, the strange activity, they didn't happen again. We moved a few more times after that, and every single time, I was afraid whatever had been in those places would follow me. Thankfully, it never did. I still don't know what it was. A demon, a ghost, something else entirely, I really can't say. I've talked about it with a few people who don't believe in this kind of thing, and some of them just laughed or brushed it off. But unless you felt something like that yourself, it's hard to explain. It wasn't just seeing or hearing things, it was the feeling. That deep, awful certainty that you're not alone, and that whatever is near you does not belong there. When I've told other people who believe in this kind of thing, they understand right away. My siblings and other relatives have shared their own experiences too, so sometimes I wonder if it's something that runs in my family. Whatever it was, I'm just grateful it stopped. used to avoid talking about the strange things that happened to me when I was younger. For a long time, I wanted people to see me as calm, logical, and hard to scare. But honestly, when I was a kid, I was nothing like that. I was 14 when this happened. Back then, I didn't really like paranormal stories. I was skeptical about most of them, even though I'd had a few odd experiences before. Nothing too extreme, just little things. A shadow in the corner of my eye. Something shifting when no one was near it. Small things you could almost explain away. But this one night was different. This is the one I've never been able to shake. At the time, I shared a bunk bed with my brother. He slept on the bottom bunk, and I had the top. I never complained about it because my bed was right next to the window, and I liked being able to look outside at night. We had curtains, but I would arrange them so the window frame held them open just enough for me to see out. It was around 10 at night. I was tired, but for some reason, I didn't feel comfortable falling asleep. I just lay there, staring outside, feeling my eyelids get heavier. I could tell I was starting to drift off, so I shifted around to get comfortable, and that woke me up a little more. I want to be clear about that. I was tired, yes, but I wasn't asleep. After a while, I settled back down and stared out the window again. That's when I saw something move. A shadow passed by outside. At first, I tried to explain it away. Maybe it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. Maybe it was the curtain moving. But then curiosity got the better of me, and I looked directly toward the spot where I had seen it. There was nothing there. From my window, I could see part of the front yard. There was a small path that led along the side of the house toward the backyard. We had a gate there because our dogs stayed out back, and we didn't want them getting around to the front. Off to the side, there was a bird bath, and near it was a holiday decoration we had recently put up. A large tree stood nearby, partly out of view. I kept staring toward the bird bath because that was where the shadow seemed to vanish. Then something stepped into view. It was tall, too tall. A black figure, but not black like a person standing in darkness. It was black like the color itself had been pulled out of the world and poured into the shape of a body. Somehow, it also looked almost see-through, like the things behind it were being swallowed into it. I know that sounds like it doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense to me either. If it had reached its arms up, I honestly think it could have climbed onto the roof of our one-story house without trying very hard. But the part that scared me most wasn't even seeing it. It was the silence. The moment I noticed it, every sound disappeared. The ceiling fan above me, which usually rattled when it spun too fast, the air conditioner pushing cold air through the room, even the small sounds of the house at night. Gone. All I could hear was that sharp, ringing kind of silence that feels like it's pressing straight into your ears. I stared at it. I don't know how long, maybe a few minutes, maybe less. Then it looked at me. It didn't slowly turn its head. It didn't search around like it was trying to find me. Its head snapped straight toward my window, like it had known exactly where I was the whole time. It had dull yellow eyes. And then it smiled. Its teeth were bright, almost glowing against the darkness of its face. They looked unnaturally white, like they didn't belong to the rest of it. There's one part of this story I used to leave out whenever I told people. Not because I forgot it, but because it sounded too impossible. I thought the second I said it, people would decide I was making everything up. But after it smiled, it turned away. And then wings came out of its back. Not feathered wings, not anything beautiful or clean like you'd see in a movie. Its back seemed to twist and reshape itself, like its own body was forcing the wings out. They looked like flesh, raw and wrong. I don't know how something like that could fly. I don't know how any of it could exist. But I watched it crouch, leap into the moonlight, and lift off the ground. As it moved farther away, it started to look smaller, almost like a bird disappearing into the dark. I couldn't move. I couldn't call out. I just lay there, frozen. Then, the moment it was gone, the sound came back. The fan, the air conditioner, my brother snoring below me. Everything returned at once. Somehow, after all of that, I eventually fell asleep. I still don't know how. The next day, I told my family what happened. They laughed it off and said I probably dreamed it, or that I must have already been half asleep. And I get why they said that. At school, I had a bad habit of making up scary stories just to fit in when other kids were talking about strange things that had happened to them. So when I finally told the truth, no one really believed me. I don't blame them. And honestly, I don't expect everyone listening to believe me either. But I know what I saw. Dream or not, explainable or not, that night happened. I was spending the night at my friend's apartment, in this old complex our families had both lived in at one point. I must have been around 12, maybe 13, so a lot of the little details from that night are blurry now. But the experience itself, that part stayed sharp. Too sharp, honestly. I remember lying down on the couch in the living room and closing my eyes, and it felt like only a second passed before my eyes opened again. At first, everything looked normal. Same couch, same room, same quiet apartment. But somehow I could see everything clearly, even though it had already been dark when I fell asleep. The whole room had this strange gray cast over it, almost like all the color had been drained out of the world. I tried to sit up, and that's when I realized something was wrong. I couldn't move. Not my arms, not my legs, not even my shoulders. The only thing I could move was my head, just enough to turn and look around. I started to panic and tried calling out for help, but even though it felt like I was yelling with everything I had, no sound came out. Then I noticed movement near the hallway. One by one, these figures started coming out from the dark. They were wearing long robes, and every single one of them had a mask on. Some of the masks looked like animals. Some looked almost angelic or demonic. A few were completely plain, just blank faces staring out from under the hoods. And the masks were the only things in the room that had any color. I wish I could remember what those colors were, but I can't. I only remember how wrong it felt. In that gray, silent room, those colored masks were somehow the most terrifying part. They moved slowly around the back of the couch, slipping out of my sight, and then they circled around until I could feel them surrounding me. One of them reached into a small pouch inside his robe, took out a pinch of powder, and sprinkled it over my forehead. The moment it touched me, my head was forced back toward the ceiling. After that, I couldn't move anything except my eyes. Then they began chanting. At least, I think it was chanting. I couldn't actually hear the words. There was no real sound, not in the normal way, but I could feel it. The vibration moved through my chest, my ribs, my whole body, like their voices were passing through me instead of around me. They kept going like that for a while, gathered around me, performing whatever that was. And then, eventually, it would stop. They would shuffle back down the hallway, one after another, and I would just drift back into sleep. The strangest part is that it didn't only happen that one time. It happened again in other places too. Different homes, different towns, even different parts of the state. Over the next few years, those visits kept happening, and for a while, I just accepted it as something that came with my life, as strange as that sounds. Then, one day, it stopped. I've never really understood what happened to me. I've never been able to explain who those figures were, what they wanted, or what they thought they were doing. But those encounters are the reason I first started believing there might be more to this world than we can see. And even now, after all these years, I still wonder what they did to me. I'm 35 now, and I live by myself. For as long as I can remember, strange experiences have sort of followed the edges of my life. I don't say that dramatically. It has just always been there, like static in the background. When I was little, I had sleep paralysis a lot. Then, when I was around 19, I had one really vivid out-of-body experience that shook me pretty deeply. After that, the sleep paralysis slowly faded. I've always been curious and open-minded, but I want to be clear. I don't go looking for frightening experiences. I don't try to invite anything in. I'm just the kind of person who notices things, maybe too much sometimes. When I was 26, after a painful loss in my life, I moved to a different state on my own. I was not in a good place then. I was depressed, drinking too much, and trying to outrun a version of myself I didn't know how to sit with. I found a room in a shared house through a rental ad. That was where the genuinely unsettling things started. At night, we'd hear footsteps moving down the hallway when everyone was accounted for. A trash bin tipped over by itself. Kitchen drawers opened and shut. Small personal things would vanish, then show up somewhere ridiculous days later. Once, one of my housemates heard what sounded like someone sprinting across the upstairs floor, but nobody was up there. It scared all of us, not just me. That part mattered because it made me feel less like I was losing my grip. Eventually, I moved into another place, hoping that would be the end of it. But the oddness seemed to continue. On one of my first nights there, my roommate's ceramic bowls somehow shattered in the cupboard while we were asleep. The doorbell would ring even though it had been disconnected. A favorite hoodie of mine disappeared from my closet and turned up weeks later folded on a chair in the laundry room. My roommate, Daniel, lost a pair of socks he wore constantly, and months later they appeared right beside the front door, clean and neatly paired. I was frightened enough at that point that I went to see a psychic. I know some people will roll their eyes at that, and I understand. But at the time, I needed someone to tell me I wasn't doomed. She said she didn't believe anything was attached to me. She thought I was just sensitive to certain places, and that I had happened to move into 2 homes with activity. Whether that was true or not, it gave me room to breathe. Over the next year, I changed a lot. I leaned back into faith, started going to church, went to counseling, and quit a few habits that had been slowly hollowing me out. I moved again too. Little by little, the activity faded. It didn't stop all at once. It was more like a storm moving away until you realize you can't hear the thunder anymore. After that, I moved closer to family and people who loved me. Life became steadier. I've still had strange moments here and there, but nothing as intense as those years. That brings me to now. In my current home, on the 3rd night after I moved in, I woke up to the sound of glass breaking loudly in the kitchen. I got up expecting to find a shattered cup or a fallen picture frame, but everything was exactly where it should have been. Nothing broken, nothing out of place. Sometimes I catch hazy shapes or little distortions moving at the edge of my vision. That could be a health thing, and I'm not ruling that out. A few times, chess pieces on a side table have fallen over during the night. Once, my bed shook lightly around 4 a.m., though again, maybe there's a physical explanation. Another time, the fuse box door was shut before I went to sleep and wide open by morning. The strange thing is, I'm not really afraid now. I like this home. It feels peaceful to me. Whatever is happening, I don't feel threatened by it. These things are also spread out over years. They aren't constant. I have noticed they seem to happen more when I'm anxious. Weirdly, They also seem to increase when I meditate more often, even though I meditate to calm myself down. So I guess what I'm asking is this: why do these things keep happening? Do some people just notice odd things more than others? Are most people having strange experiences and simply brushing them off? Am I giving too much attention to random noises, shadows, and coincidences? And maybe most importantly, is there a way to make it stop? I live up in northern Minnesota, pretty far out from everything. Not completely off the map, but close enough that we don't have neighbors nearby, and most of what surrounds the house is just woods. Thick woods, too. The kind where, once the sun goes down, everything past the tree line turns into one dark wall. I've lived out here most of my life, so I'm used to hearing animals at night. Deer moving through brush, foxes, owls, branches snapping in the cold. After a while, you learn what belongs out there. But lately, I've been hearing something that doesn't sound like an animal. It walks like a person. And I know that might sound strange, but you can tell. There's a difference between something moving on 4 legs and something moving on 2. This thing, or whoever it is definitely on 2 feet. And 3 different times now, it's been close enough to the house that I felt like it was right there, just watching. The first time wasn't even the worst. It was around 1 in the morning, and I was outside with a couple friends, just talking and messing around. Nothing serious. Then we heard footsteps in the woods. Not running, not crashing around like an animal. Walking. Slow, steady steps. We all stopped talking at the same time. I called out something like, "Hey, who's there?" But nobody answered. The footsteps just kept moving, deeper into the woods, at the same calm pace. That alone was creepy, because honestly, who would be walking around my property at 1 in the morning? The woods here are dense and dark. You don't just wander through them unless you know exactly where you're going. The second time was when it got a lot harder to explain. My friend Evan and I were sitting out in my shed one evening. We'd smoked a little, but I want to be clear, weed doesn't make 2 people hear the same loud, physical noise at the same time. We were laughing about something dumb, I don't even remember what, when suddenly there was this heavy thud on the roof. We both went quiet instantly. Then it happened again. Thud. Then again. Thud. And then we realized it sounded like footsteps, but not normal footsteps. Each step had this dragging sound behind it, like whatever was up there was pulling something heavy after every stomp. It went on for maybe 6 or 7 steps across the roof, this awful stomp, drag sound. Then it stopped. Evan and I just sat there frozen. I remember letting out this nervous little laugh, not because it was funny, but because my brain had no idea what else to do with the fear. Eventually, we got enough courage to run outside and look. It had only just gotten dark, so there was still a little bit of light left. We checked the roof as best as we could from the ground. Nothing. No animal, no branch, no marks, nothing that made sense. The third time, I was alone. It was around 11 at night, and I was home by myself. I was inside my room, and I opened the first floor window that leads out to this small brick patio beside the house. I was about to smoke a little when I heard shuffling in the grass outside. It was pitch black out there. The second I heard it, my whole body tensed up. I don't know why, but something in me said, "Turn off the light and move away from the window." So I did. I switched off the lamp and backed up toward the door. Then the sound moved from the grass onto the patio, and I swear it sounded exactly like dress shoes. That sharp little click against brick. Almost like dress shoes or even heels, slow and deliberate. Click, click, The steps came closer and closer to my open window. I stood there completely still, just waiting for someone's face to appear. I was sure some creep was about to lean in and look straight at me. But nothing happened. The clicking stopped right outside the window. For maybe 15 seconds, there was only silence. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I just stood by the door, ready to bolt if something came in. Then I heard the shoes turn around. Slowly, they clicked back across the patio, into the grass, and away from the house. And the direction they went? Straight back toward the woods. I've always been a little skeptical when people talk about strange things that happen while they're asleep, or just waking up, or stuck somewhere in between. Not because I don't believe them exactly. It's just that I've had my own experiences like that, and even now, I honestly don't know what was real and what my mind might have been doing. The first one happened when I was really young. I couldn't have been older than 5. I think it was around the time my grandmother passed away, though I'm not completely sure because I was so little. I remember waking up because I felt a hand resting on my forehead. And it wasn't scary at first. That's the strange part. It felt calm, gentle, almost comforting, like whoever it was meant no harm at all. But when I opened my eyes, there was no one there. I think I was scared after that, or at least confused. I still don't really understand how I remember it so clearly, but I do. That feeling stayed with me. There were other things in that same house too. One night when I was older, I was lying in a different room, not quite asleep yet. It was dark, and everyone else seemed to have already gone to bed. My room had this wooden door with slats in it, the kind where you can see through if you look at the right angle. Then I heard a ball bouncing right outside my door. It sounded heavy, not like one of those little rubber balls, more like a basketball hitting the floor. It bounced maybe 8 or 10 times, steady, like someone was actually dribbling it. But I didn't hear footsteps, no voices, no movement at all except that ball. Eventually, I got brave enough to open the door and check. Nothing. No person, no ball, nothing in the hallway, and I don't even think we owned a ball big enough to make that kind of sound. The noise stopped the moment I opened the door, which made it feel even stranger. I've had other experiences in other houses too, mostly hearing things. One happened in broad daylight, and another happened at night when I definitely wasn't trying to sleep yet. But I was only ever touched that one time, as a kid. I've never had sleep paralysis, at least not the kind where you can't move. But I have had moments where I was caught in that weird, half-awake state. I could move around and interact with things, but something about reality felt shifted, like the world had been quietly rewritten while I wasn't looking. The scariest time was one night when I woke up around 10 p.m. I think I had fallen asleep early. I went upstairs, maybe because I heard someone in the kitchen. I'm pretty sure it was my dad. The lights were mostly off, except for the kitchen and my parents' room. My dad greeted me, though I don't remember what he said. I think he noticed right away that something was off with me. I leaned against the counter, and then suddenly, everything changed. I didn't recognize him as my dad anymore. I didn't hear a voice telling me anything, but I just knew, somehow, that he had kidnapped me. In my mind, he wasn't my father. He was my kidnapper. He asked if I wanted water, and I said yes, but the whole time I was planning how to escape. Our kitchen had a door leading out to a deck above the driveway. The driveway was below, concrete, probably around 20 feet down. When he turned around to fill the glass, I ran for the deck door, opened it, and started climbing over the railing. I had one leg over. I really believe I would have jumped. Then my dad screamed my full name. Not my nickname, my full name. And that snapped me out of it instantly. It was like I got pulled back into my body. Suddenly he was my dad again, and the world was normal. I remember feeling embarrassed because he had yelled so loudly that the neighbors probably heard. But honestly, he saved my life that night. I still don't know what that was. Sleepwalking, maybe? Some kind of half-dream state? I remember everything, which is what makes it so unsettling. The only time I ever saw something physically move was when I was in bed watching Netflix. I wasn't falling asleep. I was just awake, lying there. I had a plant on my windowsill, and suddenly it flew off like someone had smacked it hard. Dirt went everywhere. That one I can maybe explain. My phone was plugged in, and it's possible the charger cord somehow caught behind the pot and pulled it down. But I don't remember moving at all when it happened, so I'm still not completely sure. I also used to see things out of the corner of my eye a lot in that room. And then, around the time I turned 17, it all just stopped. I'm 20 now, and nothing like that has happened in years. Part of me is still skeptical. Part of me thinks there were explanations I just never found. But another part of me remembers that hand on my forehead, that ball outside the door, and my dad screaming my full name before I almost jumped. And I still don't really know what to make of any of it. I'm 27 now, and there's one memory from when I was little that has stayed with me so clearly. It almost feels like I could step back into it. I must have been around 5 years old. I know I was younger than 6, because this happened before one of the many times we moved. My dad was in the army, so moving was a regular part of life back then. Different houses, different rooms, different schools. But this one room, for some reason, is still sharp in my mind. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night. And I know how that sounds. I know memories from childhood can twist themselves over time. They can soften at the edges or grow strange details they never had. But even now, after all these years, I still have the same feeling about it. I was awake. I wasn't dreaming. My room was completely dark. The kind of dark where everything feels flat and silent. And standing in the middle of the room, facing my bed, was my mother. At least, I thought it was my mother. I sat up, confused, and said, "Mom?" She didn't answer. Now, if this happened to me today, I think my blood would turn to ice. But I was just a little kid, and to me, it was simple. My mom was in my room. So I wasn't afraid at first. I climbed out of bed and walked toward her. I kept saying, "Mom?" softer each time, waiting for her to look at me or say something. But as I got closer, I realized something was wrong. She wasn't standing on the floor. She was floating a little above it, facing my bed, completely still. Her eyes weren't on me. They seemed fixed on the spot where I had been lying, almost like she was looking through the bed rather than at it. Her arms were slightly out from her sides, not stiff exactly, but open, in a way that reminded me later of paintings of saints or angels. Her feet didn't touch the carpet at all. And the strangest part was that she looked faintly transparent, with this pale blue glow around her, like moonlight passing through glass. I remember walking around her, slowly, trying to understand what I was seeing. I kept asking, "Mom, what are you doing?" But she never moved. She never blinked. She never turned her head. After a while, the feeling in the room changed for me. I still wasn't exactly scared, not in the way I would be now, but I knew something was off. Something about it felt too quiet, too still, too strange for a child's room in the middle of the night. So I went back to bed. That's the part that almost makes me laugh now, honestly. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just decided I didn't like it anymore, climbed back under the covers, and went to sleep. The next morning, I asked my mom why she had come into my room during the night. She looked completely confused and told me she hadn't. So I told her what I saw. She still remembers me asking her about it even now, and she still says the same thing. She never came into my room that night. I don't know what I saw. Maybe I was half asleep. Maybe my little brain created something so vivid that it became a memory. I understand all of that. But the memory has never faded, and it has never felt like a dream. It still feels like something I actually saw. I still think about that old brewery in Salt Lake City. I used to go to Utah every summer, almost like a little ritual. Same mountain air, same bright city streets, same feeling that I'd stepped into a place that knew how to keep its secrets. One year, though, I decided to do something a little different. I'd heard about this aging brick brewery on the edge of town. People said it had been around since the late 1800s, and depending on who you asked, it was either full of history or full of ghosts. Now, I've always loved a good stout, and I've always had a soft spot for strange stories, so honestly, I didn't need much convincing. I went there one evening just before sunset. The place had this warm amber glow inside, all polished wood and old photographs on the walls. But underneath that cozy feeling, there was something heavier in the air, like the building was breathing very slowly. I ordered a dark porter and sat near the back. That's when I heard it. A soft clinking sound from below. Not loud, not dramatic, just the faint sound of glass bottles touching each other somewhere under the floor. I asked the bartender, a man named Brenner, if someone was working downstairs. He looked at me for a moment, then said, "Not tonight." Of course, that was exactly the sort of answer that sends a foolish person straight toward a cellar door. And I was that foolish person. I went down slowly. The steps were narrow, the air damp and cold. By the time I reached the bottom, I could see rows of old barrels resting in the shadows. Then I heard humming. It sounded like a song, but an old one, the kind of tune you feel more than recognize. And then I saw him, a tall, dim figure standing between the barrels. He wasn't solid, not exactly. More like smoke trying to remember the shape of a man. I froze. He turned slightly, just enough for me to feel like he knew I was there. Then the humming stopped. A second later, he was gone. I nearly tripped over my own feet getting back upstairs. Brenner didn't look surprised at all. He just poured me another drink and said, "You met Elias. Used to brew here, long before any of us were born." After that, I came back every summer. Not just for the beer, though I won't pretend that didn't help. I came back because somewhere along the way, that strange little haunting started to feel familiar, almost friendly. The next year, I brought my son Nolan. He was old enough to love ghost stories, but young enough to still believe the world had hidden doors in it. I told him a little about the brewery, not too much, just enough to make his eyes go wide. That night, we sat in the same dim corner. We had our drinks, mine a porter, his just a root beer in a glass bottle, and we waited. Sure enough, when the room got quiet, the clinking started again. Nolan looked at me and whispered, "Is that him?" I nodded. We went down together, his hand wrapped tightly around mine. The cellar was colder than I remembered. The kind of cold that touches the back of your neck first. And there, among the barrels, Elias appeared again. This time, he didn't vanish. He stood still. Then slowly, he lifted one pale hand. Nolan, trembling a little, lifted his hand and waved back. And I swear to you, the humming changed. It became softer, warmer, almost happy. For years after that, the brewery became our place. Every summer, Nolan and I would visit. We'd sit upstairs, wait for the cellar song, then go down and listen. It became one of those family stories people ask you to retell, even though they already know every part. But one summer, everything felt wrong. The brewery was quiet when we arrived. Too quiet. Even Brenner, who usually greeted us with some dry little joke, barely said a word. When we went downstairs, the cold was sharper than usual. Elias was there, but he didn't look the same. His shape flickered badly, like a lantern about to go out. And instead of humming, he made this low, rough sound. A growl. Then the lights went out. Nolan grabbed my arm. I could hear him breathing in the dark. The growling moved around us, circling closer and closer. Something brushed past my shoulder, cold as river stone. Then, all at once, the lights came back. The cellar was empty. We left without speaking. That night, Nolan got sick. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion, maybe a fever. But then he became pale and weak. He stopped eating. He slept too much, and when he woke, he looked frightened, though he couldn't explain why. Doctors ran tests. Nobody had an answer. A few nights later, I woke from a dream so vivid, it felt less like sleep and more like being summoned. Elias was standing at the foot of my bed. He pointed toward the brewery. Then he disappeared. I went back alone before dawn. The building was locked, but the cellar door inside was open. I know how that sounds, but it was. Waiting for me. Downstairs, Elias stood in the corner near an old barrel I'd never noticed before. He pointed to it. Inside, beneath a layer of dust and splintered wood, I found a small iron amulet on a broken chain. The moment I picked it up, my whole arm went numb. I understood then that whatever had followed us home, whatever had wrapped itself around my son, was tied to that thing. Elias wasn't warning me away. He was asking me to end it. I held the amulet up, and the cellar seemed to bend around me. Elias recoiled, his shadowy form twisting and tearing at the edges. I threw the amulet as hard as I could against the stone wall. It shattered. The sound that came after was awful. Not loud exactly, but deep, like the building itself had cried out. Then Elias vanished. When I got home, Nolan was sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. By morning, his fever had broken. Within a week, he was himself again. The strangest part was that he didn't remember the last visit to the brewery. Not the cellar, not the growling, not Elias. And I decided not to remind him. I still go back to Salt Lake City now and then. The brewery is quieter these days. Brenner retired. The cellar is closed to visitors. No one hears the clinking bottles anymore, or at least, no one admits they do. But whenever I pass that old place, I feel a cold little tug in the air. Not threatening, not friendly either, just present. And sometimes, if the street is empty and the evening is still, I think I hear the faintest trace of a song rising from below the floorboards. I don't go looking for it anymore. Some doors, once opened, are better left standing quietly in the dark. I want to tell you about something that happened to my husband, Daniel, and me a few years back, because honestly, we still talk about it. We had taken a trip through Napa Valley, the kind where you rent a car, start up near the top of the valley, and slowly make your way down over a few days. We stayed in different little towns, bouncing between B&Bs and rental cottages, just enjoying the whole rhythm of it. One night, we stayed in this beautiful old house. It was one of the original homes in that town, and it had so much character. The hosts were lovely, genuinely warm people, and that evening we sat out on the porch with them for a while, talking and laughing. It felt peaceful. Nothing about the place felt strange at all. We went to bed around midnight. Our room was on the ground floor. When you walked in, There was a little sitting area to the left with a fireplace, a couple of old chairs, and some antique music stands with instruments nearby. To the right was the bed, and past the bed was the bathroom, with a dresser tucked into the corner near the door. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. Not fully, at first. I was lying on my right side, facing the bathroom, in that foggy space between sleeping and waking. I had that feeling that something had disturbed me, but I couldn't figure out what. I opened my eyes for a moment, and I saw a woman standing in the corner near the dresser. She was just a shape at first, but I could make out what looked like an old-fashioned dress, the kind with a fuller skirt. I remember feeling this little flicker of fear, but because I was still half asleep, I told myself I must be dreaming. So I drifted again. Then I opened my eyes a second time. This time, I saw the clock on the table beside me. I noticed the time, and right after that, I realized there was a woman's hand resting against her skirt right next to the bed. That is the part I can still see clearly. It wasn't vague or blurry. It was thin, bony, veiny, almost delicate in this unsettling way. I blinked a few times, trying to understand what I was looking at. And then I snapped fully awake. I scooted hard toward the middle of the bed, my heart just pounding. I lifted my head and looked around the room, but there was nothing there. No woman, no hand, nothing by the dresser. I realized I needed to use the bathroom, and after a few minutes of lying there trying to calm myself down, I convinced myself it had just been a wine dream. We had been in Napa, after all. It was easy enough to blame the wine and my half-asleep brain. But I still couldn't make myself get out of bed right away. When I finally did, I practically launched myself from the mattress to the bathroom door, flipped the light on, and shut the door behind me. I stayed in there for several minutes just breathing, telling myself I was fine. When I got back into bed, though, I moved closer to Daniel and pulled the covers up like I was 5 years old again. The next morning, we were lying there with coffee, slowly waking up and getting ready to go down to breakfast. Daniel looked over at me and said, "I had the weirdest dream last night." I asked him what happened. He said, "I thought I saw a woman in an old dress with a big skirt standing over by the fireplace. I watched her for a second, and then she came around the chair and started walking toward me. I sat up, and she was gone." I just stared at him. Then I said, "You are not going to believe what I'm about to tell you." And I told him what I had seen. The thing is, Daniel is not dramatic. Neither of us is. We're both pretty skeptical about ghost stories and things like that. And honestly, the whole thing almost sounds too perfect, too cliché, which is part of what bothers me. I've even wondered whether someone could have somehow gotten into the room. But that doesn't explain how she vanished. Before we left, we asked the owners, gently, if anyone had ever mentioned anything unusual about the house. Any ghost stories, anything like that. They shut it down pretty quickly and said no. But I couldn't let it go. Over the years, I've researched that house more times than I can count. I've looked into the family who built it, old records, old newspaper articles, even paid for archived pieces just trying to find something that might explain what we saw. I know it sounds strange, maybe even silly, but it has stayed with us. We still bring it up now and then, and every time we do, we both get that same chill. Because whatever happened in that room, whether it was a dream, a trick of the mind, or something else entirely, we both saw her. So I grew up graduating from this tiny little town in upstate New York, right around the Thousand Islands region. And yes, before anyone asks, like the salad dressing, it was invented around there. It's the kind of place where there's more field, forest, and river than there are actual people. If you stand in the right spot and look across the St. Lawrence River, you can see Canada sitting there like it's just part of the neighborhood. I moved there during my junior year of high school, and it didn't take long to learn where everyone went in the summer. The spot was Barker's Cove Beach, out near Cape Vincent. That was where people had bonfires, drank cheap beer, told stories, and generally did the kind of small-town things you do when there isn't much else around. There was this older woman who used to come by and collect all the empty cans after parties. Over the years, she supposedly made enough money from everybody's beer cans to buy herself an old pickup truck. That part was strange enough, honestly. But then there was the other local story. People called it the fox monkey. It was supposed to be some animal that looked kind of like a fox or a wild dog, but moved wrong. People said it could walk on two legs. Some claimed they had heard it out by the beach at night, rustling around or making noises that didn't sound like anything normal. Back then, I thought it was ridiculous. My high school boyfriend, Connor, who I really should have broken up with much sooner, was the first person who told me about it. He swore he'd heard strange sounds out there late at night. There was also a man who camped around that area for a while, and he supposedly said he had seen odd things near the tree line after dark. I didn't buy any of it. Not really. I mean, small towns run on rumors, boredom, and somebody's cousin claiming they saw something weird behind a barn. A few years later, though, I was in my early 20s, driving around with my two best friends. We had met a couple of guys from out of town, and we were showing them the area. Somehow, as those drives always do, we ended up out by the beach after dark, then taking the back roads away from it. Everyone in the car was laughing and talking. Nothing felt strange. It was just one of those late-night drives where the road is empty, the woods are pressed right up against you, and the headlights feel like the only thing keeping the dark from swallowing the car. Then we saw eyes on the side of the road. That familiar flash, that little glint animals get when your headlights catch them. And when you live somewhere rural, your body reacts before your brain does. You slow down, because everybody has either hit a deer, almost hit a deer, or knows someone with a dented hood because of one. So I slowed down. At first, I thought it was a small coyote, maybe a strange-looking dog. It was low to the ground, about that size, with dark, thick fur that looked longer than normal. It moved across the road in front of us, and nobody really said anything because there was nothing too unusual about it. Not at first. But when it reached the other side of the road, it stopped. Just stopped. And then it stood up. Not rearing back like an animal startled by headlights, not hopping or scrambling. It stood up on two legs and walked away into the dark like a person. The whole car went dead silent. For a few seconds, nobody breathed. Nobody laughed. Nobody tried to explain it. Finally, I said, "Did anyone else just see that?" And every single person in the car answered at once, all in different versions of, "Yeah, what the hell was that?" We drove off pretty fast after that. Nobody wanted to get out. Nobody wanted to investigate. There was no brave movie moment where somebody grabbed a flashlight and went into the trees. Absolutely not. We were done. My two best friends and I still talk about it to this day. And the strange part is, our memories have never really changed. We all remember the same thing. An animal-shaped thing crossing the road, stopping, standing upright, and walking off on two legs. We still call it the fox monkey, mostly because that was the only name we ever had for whatever it was. I don't know what we saw that night. I really don't. It never came toward us. It never made a sound. It didn't threaten us in any obvious way. But somehow, that almost made it worse, because it just walked away like that was normal. And all these years later, I can still see it in the headlights. I've carried this story around for a long time, and I don't think I've ever really known how to tell it. My father passed away almost 2 years ago. It happened after a short, brutal fight with anaplastic thyroid cancer. He was diagnosed in late summer of 2020, and everything after that moved so fast, it still feels unreal sometimes. At the time, I was working in virology at a major research institute that studied coronaviruses. When the pandemic started unfolding, my colleagues and I were watching it closely, not from a distance, but right in the middle of the scientific machinery trying to understand it. Our lab was analyzing early viral sequences and studying how the virus behaved, how it spread, and how it could jump between species. I only mention that because my father still thought he knew better than I did. Back in January and February of 2020, before everything shut down, I went to visit my family. There was still a lot of public debate about whether the virus was really dangerous or whether everyone was overreacting. During that visit, I remember hearing my father, along with my aunt and uncle, say things like, "It's not going to be that bad here. We're cleaner. We're more advanced. This is just politics. They're trying to scare people and wreck the economy." I was younger then, and honestly, less patient. Today I might have let it go, but back then I pushed back hard. I told them the early data looked serious. I told them the few confirmed cases in the US probably meant it was already spreading. I told them that kind of overconfidence could cost people their lives. They laughed at me. Not cruelly at first, but enough that it stung. Enough that I remember it. Later that night, after drinks had been poured and everyone had drifted into their own conversations, I ended up alone with my dad in the heated pool. It was late, maybe around 1 in the morning. We were both floating there, drinking scotch, talking about the world, the news, politics, the virus, all of it. My father and I had already grown apart by then. After college, our views had split sharply. He had moved deeper into conspiracy thinking, and conversations with him had become harder. He could be charming and funny 1 minute, then angry and cutting the next. That night, I repeated some of what I had said earlier. I probably shouldn't have. He got louder, then sharper, then cruel. He started saying things about me, about my wife, about the way I lived my life. His voice rose until he was shouting, even though I was only a few feet away. I remember thinking, the neighbors are going to hear this. Then I remember thinking something worse. He might actually hit me. And then something changed. I was looking right at him, and suddenly he didn't look like my father anymore. The first thing I noticed was his mouth. My dad had been a dentist. He cared about teeth. His were always straight, white, perfect. But in that moment, they looked dark, almost black. His lower teeth seemed jagged, uneven, wrong. His gums looked pale, like the color had drained out of them. Then his whole face seemed to shift. His eyes looked sunken. The skin under them sagged into deep, heavy shadows. Every line in his face became exaggerated, like age had rushed into him all at once. His expression twisted while he kept yelling, and I stopped really hearing the words. I was just watching him. Then I looked down at his neck and chest. They looked dark too, nearly black in places, and not in a way that made sense with the pool lights or the shadows from the deck. The water suddenly felt colder. His voice dropped lower. It got louder too, but not in a normal way. It had this heavy, gravelly sound that made my stomach tighten. He kept talking, but what he was saying stopped making sense. It was like anger had taken the wheel, and whatever was speaking through him was just pouring out poison. The whole pool area seemed to dim. Finally, I interrupted him. I think I said, "Wait, what?" And just like that, he stopped. He smiled. Then he said something casual, something like, "Well, that's probably what people are going to argue with you about anyway." The darkness lifted. His face looked normal again. The pool lights seemed brighter. His voice went back to being his voice. He started joking, easing the tension, acting like the last few minutes had never happened. But they had happened. I sat there trying to understand what I had just seen. Maybe it was alcohol. Maybe it was stress. Maybe I was finally seeing a part of him clearly that I had avoided looking at for years. But the physical details were so vivid. The teeth, the face, the cold water, the voice. I can still feel it when I think about it. Part of me wondered if the hate coming out of him had opened some kind of door, like something dark had found a way in. 4 months later, he started having strange symptoms in his throat. He blamed it on wearing N95 masks at work. A month after that, his voice began to go. Not long after, we found out he had an aggressive thyroid cancer. There was a large tumor on his thyroid, and it had already spread to his lungs and spine. For a while, after treatment, they said there was no new cancer detected. But with that kind of cancer, clear never really means cured. The radiation damaged his throat badly. He developed an infection in his neck and went septic. Then a feeding tube placement went wrong and injured his bowel, which led to emergency surgery. After that, a clot in his neck broke loose. He had a massive stroke and couldn't breathe on his own. Less than 2 years after that night in the pool, my father was gone. I don't know what I believe. I'm a scientist. I don't naturally reach for supernatural explanations. But I also know what I saw, and I know how it felt. There was one other time when I heard that same voice. It was after his diagnosis, before chemo and radiation. He was at home, talking with family, reflecting on his life. He was saying he was proud of what he had accomplished. Then, out of nowhere, he turned to me, and in that same deep, rough voice from the pool, he said, "And screw you for thinking I don't deserve everything I earned." Everyone froze. No one knew where it came from. I got up and left the room. The next day, he apologized. He said he didn't remember saying it. He said he didn't believe it. Then he started crying, and for the first time in a long time, he looked scared. Not angry, not proud, just scared. And I believed him, because I don't think that was really my dad speaking. I'm 30 now, and the first time this happened was back in 2012, during my first year of college. I was stuck on campus over a long holiday weekend because I was on academic probation and had a mountain of work to catch up on. My roommates had all gone home, so the dorm was unusually quiet. That kind of quiet that feels bigger than the room itself. That night, I finished my assignments, scrolled through my phone for a while, and then got hit with this strange, heavy tiredness. It was only around 8:30, but I fell asleep with the lights still on. Maybe 20 or 30 minutes later, I snapped awake. I don't know how else to describe it, but I knew I wasn't alone. My bed was lofted above my desk, so when I rolled over and looked down into the middle of the room, I saw something curled up on the floor. At first, my brain refused to accept it. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and kept telling myself, "Wake up, wake up." But I was awake. There was a figure down there, curled into itself like a person in the fetal position. After a few seconds, it seemed to realize I was looking at it. Then it slowly stood up. I froze. It looked human, but only in shape. No face, no hair, no clothes, no details at all. just this cloudy, opaque human form. I couldn't tell if it was male or female. It was maybe 5'10", and it started moving toward me. I didn't feel hatred from it exactly. I didn't feel some obvious evil pouring off it. But I also had no interest in finding out what it wanted. The worst part was that it was between me and the door. I yelled at it to stop. It kept coming. When it was only a few feet from me, something in my body finally kicked in. I jumped down from the loft, hit the floor hard, and ran past it as fast as I could. It didn't grab me. It didn't block me. It just let me go. I ended up in the hallway, shaking, breathing like I'd just run for my life, because honestly, that's what it felt like. The dorm was mostly empty because of the weekend, but eventually I found a friend still hanging around down the hall. I didn't tell him what had happened. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to sound unstable or dramatic, so I convinced myself I was exhausted and stressed. A few hours later, I forced myself to go back to my room. Nothing was there. Still, I kept every light on and stayed awake the rest of the night. The next year, in 2013, my roommates and I had moved into a different dorm room. For a while, nothing happened, and I started to believe the first incident had been some weird one-time thing. Then, late in the fall, it happened again. This time, all three of us were in the room. It was a school night, and we had just started falling asleep when that same uneasy feeling washed over me. I opened my eyes and turned my head. The figure was there again, standing near the head of my bed, reaching up toward me. I lost it. I yelled and woke my roommates. One of them flipped on the light, and the second the room lit up, the figure was gone. My roommates were annoyed, which I honestly understand. They told me I was imagining things and needed to sleep. But I knew what I'd seen. It happened 2 more times during college. The last college incident was during my senior year. I woke up with that familiar dread sitting in my chest. My closet door was open, and when I looked into it, the figure was standing inside. Just standing there. I stared at it and tried to talk myself down. I told myself it was my imagination. I told myself fear was making shapes out of shadows. Then it stepped out of the closet. That broke whatever calm I was pretending to have. I shouted at it, told it not to come any closer, and then it vanished. After graduation, I joined the military. I honestly thought leaving that old dorm behind would end it. I told myself it was college stress, lack of sleep, bad mental health. Whatever explanation made the world feel normal again. But it didn't stop. By then, I was engaged to the woman who's now my wife, and we had 2 dogs. We moved to Florida for my first duty station, and the experiences followed me there. Different apartments, different houses, same feeling. Usually, it started with the dogs. They would growl at the bedroom door, low and serious, the way dogs do when they sense something they do not like. Then I would see one of the figures. My wife would wake up to me shouting at something she couldn't see, telling it not to come closer, telling it to leave us alone. That frightened her badly, and I can't blame her. From her side of it, I was yelling into empty space. But from my side, something was there. Each time, it seemed to get a little closer before disappearing. It never touched me, not then, but it always came near enough to make my whole body go cold. And it didn't feel like the same figure every time. That's hard to explain, but each one had a different presence. Over time, they felt darker, heavier, more hostile, like something was being drawn to me. This happened several times between 2017 and 2019. Then came the last encounter, in 2020. My wife was pregnant with our son, and I was about a month away from deployment. I was doing pre-deployment training, not sleeping great, carrying more stress than I probably admitted. That night, I fell asleep beside my wife and had only been out for maybe an hour when I woke up because I couldn't breathe. I felt hands around my throat. There was weight on my chest. At first, I didn't even think shadow person. I thought someone had broken into the house and was attacking me. I struggled. I fought. I could feel it. I swear I could grab it. I wrestled with whatever it was until I felt like I got the upper hand. Then it dropped to the floor and crawled under the bed. My wife was awake by then because I'd been thrashing around. I was in full panic, looking for something to use as a weapon, telling her to get out of the house and call the police. She wouldn't leave. She kept telling me it was a bad dream. I looked under the bed. There was nothing. No intruder, no figure, nothing at all. I was embarrassed, but more than that, I was terrified. My wife said it was probably stress from the deployment coming up, and honestly, maybe it was. I saged the house anyway, because at that point I needed to do something, even if it was only for my own peace of mind. That was the last time it happened. I haven't seen anything like that since. I know there could be a psychological explanation. I understand how unbelievable it sounds. I don't tell many people this story unless they already believe in things like this, because if someone told it to me, I'm not sure I'd believe them either. But I know what I experienced. I know how awake I felt. I know I don't sleepwalk. I've never had sleep paralysis. Every time I was fully conscious, fully aware, and absolutely terrified. Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was something else. All I know is that for years, something kept coming closer. And then one night, it finally touched me. I was still small enough to be sleeping in a cot back then. Most nights, my mom, my dad, or my older sister would put me to bed, tuck me in, and leave the door open with the hallway light on. And almost every time, the second they walked away, I would see him. There was this full-body shadow standing in the corner of my room, right near the door. My wardrobe was in that corner too, and that's where he would always be. It was strange, because even with the hallway light shining in, that whole patch of the room looked darker than it should have, like he was soaking up the light around him. I was terrified of him. He never spoke. He never moved at first. He just stood there, facing me, watching me from the corner while I was supposed to be sleeping. Most nights, I couldn't even lie down. I just stare at him from the cot, completely frozen, until I finally got the courage to climb out and run past him. I'd sprint downstairs and cling to whoever was there. My mom, my dad, my sister, anyone. I'd hold on and refuse to let go, because downstairs felt safe. But even after they brought me back up, it could happen again the same night. I'd see him in the corner, panic, climb out, and run. Then one night, something different happened. I remember falling asleep pretty quickly, which wasn't normal for me. Then I woke up with this strange feeling. The only way I can explain it is that I felt light. Not dizzy, not sick. Just light, almost weightless. I opened my eyes, and the shadow man was closer than usual. Every time I blinked, he seemed to move nearer, slowly, quietly. But the strange thing was, I wasn't scared this time, not even a little. I blinked again, and he was leaning over the cot, reaching toward me. Then I felt myself being lifted. It was gentle, warm. I remember feeling safe, which still feels odd to say, because this was the same figure that had frightened me so many nights before. He lifted me out of the cot and held me near his face. But there was no face, just darkness, featureless, pitch black. He held me there for a few seconds, almost like he was looking at me. Then he placed me softly back into the cot. I opened my eyes one more time and saw him moving back to the corner where he always stood. After that, I fell asleep. I didn't see him again for a couple of years. The next time, I was walking from the kitchen toward the living room. It was the middle of the day and the lights were on. My mom was behind me in the kitchen, washing dishes. That's when I saw him come down the stairs. He didn't move like a normal person exactly. He sort of glided, but I could still hear the sound of footsteps as he came down. I watched him walk straight into the front room, full body, clear as anything. At first, I thought it must have been my dad. So I went through the back room, which connected to the front room, expecting to find him sitting on the settee watching television. But both rooms were empty. I went back into the kitchen, confused, and asked my mom where Dad was. She told me he was at work. So I asked her, "Then who just came down the stairs and went into the front room?" She turned around and asked me what I meant. I told her exactly what I'd seen. The man coming down the stairs, the footsteps, the way he went into the front room. She looked confused too, but neither of us really knew what to say, so we just let it go. A little while later, when I was maybe 7 or 8, I finally asked her about it properly. I told her everything from the beginning. I told her about the man in the corner, how he used to stand near my wardrobe, how I would run downstairs because I was so frightened, how one night he lifted me out of the cot and put me back gently. My mom asked me to describe him, so I did. I told her he wore a black leather jacket with a pale shirt underneath. He had blue jeans, black boots, and dark hair. I told her I could never really see his face, but somehow I felt like he was older, maybe in his 40s or 50s. I don't know how I knew the colors of his clothes. He had always looked like a shadow to me, but somehow I knew. When I finished describing him, my mom went very quiet. Then she looked me right in the eyes and said, completely serious, "You've just described my dad." Her father had passed away not long before all of that started. I was 9 years old the first time something happened that I couldn't explain. And honestly, after that, I never really stopped believing. I'm 30 now, and in all these years, I've had enough strange moments that I don't really try to talk myself out of them anymore. Some people might call them coincidences. I don't think they were. That first one happened early in the morning. I was sitting at the family computer, just doing whatever 9-year-olds did back then, probably playing some little game or clicking around online, when I heard a sound off to my left. It was soft but heavy, almost like someone letting out a tired breath. I turned my head, and standing there was my Uncle Caleb, which made no sense at all because he wasn't supposed to be at our house. He looked right at me, gave me this small wink, and then he was just gone. Not walked away, not stepped out of the room. Gone. It happened so quickly that I just sat there thinking, okay, I imagined that. I had to have imagined that. But about 2 hours later, my mom and my aunt came over. My mom didn't live with us at the time, so seeing them show up together already felt serious. They told us my uncle had passed earlier that morning. He'd been fighting stage 4 lung cancer, and we all knew he was sick, but I still wasn't ready to hear it. My dad and I spent a lot of time at my mama's house, and my uncle lived with her, so I had gotten really close to him. I still believe that was him coming to tell me goodbye. When I was 13, something else happened. Across from our house, there were woods with all these winding four-wheeler trails. I used to ride my bike out there, usually with a girl from the neighborhood. But one afternoon, I decided to go alone, which, looking back, was not my brightest little wilderness moment. I had been riding for maybe 20 minutes when this man suddenly came out from between the trees. He was dressed in camouflage, like hunting clothes, and he started yelling at me to get out of there. He sounded angry, really angry. I figured he was hunting and thought I was scaring off deer or something. So I turned my bike around fast and started pedaling back the way I came. But when I glanced over my shoulder, he was gone. There was nowhere he could have ducked into that quickly. No turn, no hidden path close enough. Nothing. 1 second he was there, yelling at me, and the next second, the woods were empty. The next day, there was a local news story about a bear attack in that same stretch of woods, just farther out than where I had been riding. I still think something, or someone, was getting me out of there. At 15, my friends and I made the very classic teenage decision of doing something we had no business doing. We played with a Ouija board. None of us took it seriously. We were laughing, asking ridiculous questions, accusing each other of moving the planchette. It felt silly at the time, like a sleepover game with a spooky costume on. But after that night, things started happening around the house. I'd wake up and find faucets running. I'd hear footsteps when nobody else was moving around. Sometimes, very faintly, I'd hear whistling. Not loud, not enough to prove anything to anyone, just enough to make your stomach tighten. That went on for months. I never reacted to it. I didn't yell. I didn't ask questions. I didn't give whatever it was any attention. And then one day, it just stopped. Maybe it got bored. Maybe it moved on. I don't know. I was just grateful when the house felt quiet again. When I was 26, I was volunteering as the secretary at a church. The church building was old and huge, and I never liked being there by myself. There was this constant feeling, this pressure almost, like I was being watched from somewhere I couldn't see. I heard footsteps above me more than once, even when I knew nobody was upstairs. One Saturday, I went in alone to redo the bulletin board. I was in the office printing things and talking to my sister on speakerphone when suddenly I heard loud voices coming from the hallway. Not a whisper, not pipes, voices. My sister heard them too. She immediately asked, "Who is that?" I told her I'd call her back because I assumed someone had come in, probably the pastor. I stepped into the hall. Nobody was there. I went downstairs, checked the entrance, looked outside to see whose car was parked there. Only mine. So I called my sister back and kept her on the phone while I walked through the church, checking rooms. I didn't find anyone. But when I stepped into the sanctuary, I heard heavy footsteps coming from the balcony. I looked up. Nothing. No person. No movement. Just that awful feeling, like the building itself was holding its breath. I did not finish the bulletin board that day. I left. And then, when I was 30, something happened at home. My oldest son had a karaoke machine in his room. My husband and I were having a date night, so both of our kids were staying with my mother-in-law. Sometime in the middle of the night, that karaoke machine turned on by itself, absolutely blasting music. And his bedroom light was on. I know that light had been off. I know it. My husband went in, unplugged the karaoke machine, and turned the light off. I stayed awake after that because there was no part of me that was going back to sleep like a peaceful little woodland creature after a haunted karaoke concert. The strangest part was, that machine hadn't even been used in months. Then the next night, I woke up to loud banging downstairs. Hard bangs, not the house settling, not a little creak. Loud enough that I shook my husband awake, genuinely confused about how he had slept through it. But as soon as he woke up, the banging stopped. It didn't happen again that night. I still don't have neat explanations for any of it. I just know what I saw, what I heard, and what I felt. And after all these years, I've learned that some things don't need to announce what they are. Sometimes they just pass through your life, leave a chill in the room, and keep moving. I've gone back and forth on whether I should even tell this story because I still don't fully know what to make of it. Part of me thinks there has to be some ordinary explanation for at least a few things that happened. Old building, noisy vents, animals moving around in their enclosures, that kind of thing. But after a while, it started happening often enough that it became something my coworkers and I talked about pretty regularly. So, for a little context, I used to work at a pet supply store. It was a big place, much bigger than it looked from the outside, and the building itself had definitely been around for a while. I was usually scheduled for closing shifts, which meant that for the last hour or so, it was normally just me and one other person in the store. The final half hour was closed to customers, so we used that time to clean, count the registers, and straighten everything up for the next day. Now, we had always heard these little thumps around the store. Sometimes they sounded almost like footsteps. I never took them too seriously, though. I figured it was the air system kicking on, or one of the animals rustling around, or just the building settling. My coworker, Annie, and I used to joke that the place was haunted, but it was always just that, a joke. At least, at first. The first thing that made me feel like maybe it wasn't only a joke came from my manager. One afternoon, we were short-staffed, so there were only 4 of us working. The 3 of us were near the registers, and my manager was back in her office. Her office was right beside the bathroom, and the walls were thin enough that if someone was talking in the office, you could hear it pretty clearly from the bathroom. My manager had gone into the bathroom, and when she came out, she walked straight up to us at the front. She looked unsettled. She asked, "Was anyone just in my office?" We all told her no. None of us had left the front. That's when she told us she had heard someone in her office talking to her dog. Her dog was in there at the time, and she said whoever it was had been calling him by name, speaking to him like they knew him. But nobody had been in that office. That was the moment the whole thing started to feel a little less funny. Not long after that, we switched to holiday hours, which meant Annie and I had to stay in the store an extra hour and a half by ourselves. Honestly, most nights were pretty relaxed. Hardly anyone came in that late, so we would chat, buy snacks, wander the aisles, and keep ourselves entertained while still getting our work done. One night, we decided to do a little pretend ghost hunt. We weren't taking it seriously. We were just messing around with one of those TikTok filters that's supposed to detect a person and turn them into a little character or silhouette. The weird thing about that filter was that sometimes, if you pointed it at an empty space, it would still show a human-shaped figure. We walked around laughing, pointing it down empty aisles, and at one point, it showed what looked like 2 faceless people standing near the shelves in front of us. It startled us, but we both kind of brushed it off. It was just a filter. Phones do weird things. Later that night, we were sitting in an aisle that faced the grooming room. Annie was still playing around on her phone, and I was sitting on a stack of dog food bags. The grooming room had a big glass window, so you could see inside pretty clearly. That's when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. It looked like a dark gray, almost smoky orb, and it dropped quickly from the upper corner of the grooming room. It moved downward, then vanished before it reached the floor. It happened so fast that I didn't say anything right away. I wasn't even sure I had really seen it. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Annie said quietly, "Did you see that?" I didn't want to lead her, so I asked, "What did you see?" And she said, "Something gray, like a ball or an orb." That gave me chills. I got up, grabbed 2 pieces of receipt paper from the register, and told her, "Okay, I'm going to draw what I saw, and you draw what you saw. Then we'll compare." So we did, and when we showed each other, we had drawn the same strange shape in the same part of the room. After that, the store didn't feel fun anymore that night. It felt too big, too quiet, and every aisle felt like it had something waiting in it. The last major thing I remember happened on a day when the power went out. The store was closed, and a few of us were stuck there waiting for it to come back on. After a while, we ran out of actual work to do, so we were just hanging around with the manager and trying to pass the time. Someone had the idea to grab one of the UV flashlights from the shelf and walk around the store with it, just for fun. The flashlight didn't have batteries, so my manager and I went back to the office to look for some. As soon as we stepped inside, we both heard a loud, distinct banging from the ceiling. Not a little creak, not a soft tap, banging. The power had been out for hours by then, so we both just froze and listened. My manager looked at me and said, "What is that?" The second she said it, the banging stopped. Completely. We stood there for another moment, waiting for it to happen again, but it never did. Eventually, we grabbed the batteries and went back out to the sales floor, but I don't think either of us felt very playful after that. I still don't know what was going on in that store. Maybe there are explanations for all of it. Maybe old buildings make strange noises and phones glitch and tired people see things in the corners of rooms. But I know what I saw, and I know Annie saw it too. The strangest part is that after Annie quit, everything seemed to get quiet. I don't know if it was because we had been joking about it so much, or because we kept calling attention to it, or if it was all just coincidence. But after those nights, I never liked being alone in that store. Not even for a minute.